Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76. The price of 199 is amazing. Seeing that Cedric followed his advice and was willing to make sacrifices for the team, Karl, as the boss, still gave his approval. He secretly gave the other person a thumbs up, then ruthlessly threw the other person aside and continued chatting. I hope you all have seen the extraordinary charm of this flying broom, but I think there is only one question that everyone is most concerned about right now. That is, how much is the price of this flying broom? With these words, all the attention that Cedricna had gained by sacrificing her looks was shifted to Carol. Many students who love Quidditch held their breath and began to expect Karl to say the price they wanted. But Karl knew the meaning of playing hard to get, and as if he suddenly remembered something, he walked to Cedric and said with a smile, "Oh, I forgot to introduce you. This is the brand ambassador of our new flying broom, Mr. Cedric Diggory. Everyone can go and take photos with him after the press conference. Of course, I think most of them will be our passionate and beautiful girls. We agreed in advance that we can only take photos together, but you are not allowed to touch me." This kind of joke not only eased the tense atmosphere on the scene, but also raised everyone's expectations to a higher level. Many students began to complain or join in the jokes in this noisy atmosphere. Karl suddenly pressed the button in his hand, and the big screen behind him suddenly changed, followed by a sound like a heavy object falling to the ground. A huge price tag of 199 suddenly appeared on the big screen. "Oh, what? So handsome," exclamations came one after another. Whether it was the little lions of Gryffindor or the little snakes of Slytherin. They all stood up, clapping their hands hard and shouting loudly. Karl on the stage also cooperated very well and spoke loudly. "It's not 1000 gold galleons, nor is it 500 gold galleons. It's only 199, the standard version of Absolute Blade number 1, and you can take it home directly." At the same time, we also launched limited edition suits and private custom handmade waistlines. A one-of-a-kind signed edition, and this one as well. As he spoke, Karl pressed the button in his hand again, and a more exquisitely designed broom appeared in silver and black. Appearing on the big screen, on the wooden stick of the flying broom, there was an extremely graceful silver waistline. And at the top, there is the Hogwarts emblem engraved in 4 colors. This special flying broom just appeared. This immediately sparked another heated discussion, and Carol spoke slowly, to commemorate this great move, and to let everyone understand the power of innovation, inclusion, and youth. It is the driving force that pushes the world forward. So I'm launching the Hogwarts Special Commemorative Edition Absolute Blade number 1, limited to 99 pieces. Orders are now open. The first 10 users who place an order will also be able to enjoy a close interaction with our legendary principal. Let the greatest wizard of this century personally hand over the broomstick to you." As soon as he finished speaking, the Hogwarts students present, as well as student representatives from Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and Beard School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They were stunned at first, and then they could no longer control themselves. They stood up one by one, waving their hands and shouting in unison, "Karl Hohenzollern, Karl Hohenzollern, Karl Hohenzollern." The cheers came one after another, and Dumbledore, who was sitting in the audience, had an extremely strange look on his face. He always felt that the scene before him was familiar. Almost half a century ago, there was also a young man. Wherever he stands, he can attract countless followers shouting his name. After so many years, history has finally come full circle and returned to the starting point. Faced with the cheers, Karl just waved calmly and then winked at Dumbledore frantically. Stand up quickly, old man, and smile. Can't you keep smiling? Karl tried desperately to send signals to Dumbledore with his eyes, but the old guy didn't seem to have any intention of communicating with him at all. Karl sat alone in his seat, as if he was autistic. In the end, he was helpless and his eyes were a little sore. I could only smile helplessly. "Please, Forgive me, an old man who has served Hogwarts for so long. Our headmaster seems a little shy. Please understand." After covering up his embarrassment, Karl quickly changed the subject. He looked at the representative of the Lightwheel Company whose face looked extremely ugly. He could already imagine that the other party just had a strong desire to kill him, but Karl simply disdained it. Is it broken already? It's still too early. After the climax of the whole press conference, Carol introduced their new products. To match the Absolute Blade #1 flight helmet, there should be the company logo and flight jacket at the end of the entire press conference. Karl pressed the button in his hand again, and the cover of a book suddenly appeared on the big screen behind him. Everyone looked at the book with puzzled expressions, but Karl opened his arms, as if he wanted to embrace the whole world. Looking at the puzzled students, he spoke loudly. "You may be confused. In many people's impressions, Quidditch and study seem to be in some kind of contradictory relationship, but what I want to say is that the development of anything is always inseparable from learning, and it is always inseparable from all the users who use it. So after difficult discussions, my business partner, Mr. Lucius, and I have made a very important decision. We will open up our company, all the processes involved in making brooms, and all the magic involved to all wizards." After hearing this, most of the people present were shocked for the nth time, including all the students and the representatives of Gwangle and Company. He looked at Karl on the stage with a look as if he had seen a ghost. The students were shocked, but for the third time, the applause and cheers were enough to blow the roof of the auditorium off. I tried my best to salute Karl, but Karl just waved lightly and still kept smiling. "Your imagination is correct. From today on, any young wizard who is interested and capable will be welcome to join us. You all can just make your own broomstick. Of course, you need to go through our company and Comet Company, and with the certification from the Ministry of Magic's Broomstick Administration, you can use it yourself or sell it." As he spoke, Karl pressed the button in his hand for the last time, and the PPT behind him also came to the last page, with a capital letter N transformed from lightning appearing on the screen. Karl bowed slightly, like an actor about to take his bow, and spoke softly. "Finally, let me introduce our flying broom company to you. I named it Newton. There may be many of you who don't understand what this name means, but I just want to say one thing. Once upon a time, the supreme god drove humans out of the Garden of Eden because of an apple, but Newton, a human, could also use an apple to dethrone God. You don't have to understand the meaning of this name. You just need to understand that the future is now given to you. In the flying broom field, there is no longer the one true God. Everything has been returned to the public." After finishing speaking, Karl slowly walked down the stage, admiring the deathly pale expression of the representative of the Lightwheel Company as he walked. Because from today onwards, this industry-leading company will be completely pushed from heaven to hell. Not only did they lose their product advantage, but in the future, any new brooms they released would need to pass the industry standards set by the boy. As a famous saying goes in the business world, second-rate companies create products, first-rate companies build brands, and top companies set industry rules. Karl came to the stage, enjoying his own cheers. His opponent, who was no longer willing to cooperate, his complete death. Until the voice of the dog system appeared in my mind. "Great host, you are still so despicable, shameless, and cruel. When you suppress your opponents, every move is bloody and fatal. I have to give you a big reward. 1 point. Now you have 386,000 points. Go and crush your opponents. Admire their despair when they are defeated." To this pervert who often disturbed him, Carol just replied lightly, "Don't force me to slap you when I'm at my happiest." Chapter 77. The prototype of the magical world stock market. The press conference is just a good start, but the most important thing is the marketing methods that come after that. I hope you can pay more attention to this. After all, I can't leave Hogwarts yet. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Lucius. The day after the press conference, Karl sat in the principal's office, drinking and chatting with Lucius after class today. He walked here from the classroom. All the classmates he passed by were enthusiastically discussing yesterday's press conference. This was a good start. In order to strike while the iron was hot, He even resisted the urge to eat. I rushed here right after class, and I was really worried about the team. Lucius felt a little restrained. After all, the principal was still working outside, and the two of them hid in the principal's office drinking. There was always a bad feeling, but Karl saw the other party's conflict of conscience, and was ready to correct this serious cognitive error. Said disdainfully, "Mr. Lucius, you don't need to think about other irrelevant things. In this matter, you said Headmaster Dumbledore, we are just colleagues and partners. He made a mistake at the press conference. I did not deduct his salary. It just added a little bit of workload to him. He should thank me instead of showing his unhappiness on his face." Hearing this, Lucius felt a little embarrassed, and at the same time he was complaining madly in his heart. The interactive session with the principal, which was originally offered to the first 10 users who placed an order, was expanded to include all 99 users who ordered the limited edition flying broomsticks under the pretext of providing benefits to the family. The workload suddenly increased almost 10 times when I walked out of the auditorium. Looking at his former principal, who was acting in the auditorium as a machine that only knew how to smile and hug. He had to take photos with others from time to time, and Lucius was a little worried because Dumbledore was so old. If I get facial paralysis because I laughed too much in the past few days, that would be really difficult to deal with. Thinking of this, Lucius wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. After all, even Dumbledore didn't take him seriously. Being with Cole was a bit too stressful. But Carol didn't seem to care about it at all. He asked slowly, while shaking his wine glass, "Okay, let's not talk about that old thing anymore. Tell me how the sales of the flying brooms are going. How many reservations have been made? Have you encountered any difficulties?" Hearing that the other party was talking about serious matters, Lucius did not dare to delay. He hurriedly put down his wine glass, took out the report he had prepared in advance, and handed it over. As he watched Karl flipping through the pages, he slowly explained, "The sales far exceeded our expectations. The number of pre-orders on the first day reached 1,000, of which the standard version was the most popular, with more than 500. The Pro Maximum version is the second, at about 300, and the customized premium version is the cheapest, at just over 150. In fact, there is another problem. I found that the people who buy it are generally younger, even though the price is already very cheap, but there are still many people who can't afford to pay so much money at one time. If this problem can be solved, sales are expected to double." Looking at the professional and detailed account forms in his hand, Karl expressed great satisfaction. It seems that the Malfoy family, known as the Platinum Nobility. He is quite capable. At least he has a good learning ability and can produce such a professional account book in a short time. Praise should also be given. Karl slowly closed the account, looked at Lucius with a smile and said, "Very professional, Mr. Malfoy. I recognize your ability. Please keep it up, just like you promised when we first met. As long as you keep working hard, you will be blessed with wealth, honor and everything you want, and I will never lie. You should be happier working with me than with that psychopath who only writes empty promises." "Of course, Mr. Hohenzollern." Lucius nodded with a smile, but still couldn't help wiping the cold sweat from his forehead and spoke in a low voice, "But, if possible, I still hope not to mention that person." Karl found it very funny to see that this guy was about to have a stress reaction due to Voldemort. But he did not express it directly. After all, he was good at gentle persuasion, and he never cared about using violence to force women into prostitution. So he nodded. "Of course, no problem. As for the question you just raised, it is exactly what I expected, and it is also an opportunity. When you return, immediately publicize through all channels that the Wizard Cornucopia Foundation has reached an exclusive financial cooperation with our company. As long as you are a student studying at Hogwarts, you can apply directly from the foundation for a 12 installment interest-free loan to purchase our flying broom." At this point, Cole paused, stood up, picked up the bottle, and slowly filled Lucius's glass. The amber liquid kept swirling in the glass. Karl looked at the wine in front of him and said lightly without even raising his head, "You need to think more flexibly. In terms of business, you still need to learn more from the Muggle society. It's easy if he doesn't have money. We can lend him money, not just for the flying broomstick industry. We can also lend him new wizard robes, potion materials, and so on. In all high consumption areas, you can go to those stores and ask them to cooperate with us. Of course, after all, they are not our company, so they need to charge fees. When lending money, they also need to charge appropriate interest. I think 20% a year is pretty good. Hearing this, Lucius was a little dumbfounded. He picked up the wine glass and took a big gulp. A large glass of sherry went into his stomach, but he still felt his tongue a little dry. He really had never thought that business could be done in this way, but he soon discovered the problem and asked with some fear, "But if that happens, what if many people borrow money and spend money in advance and can't pay it back in the end? Then we'd be in big trouble, and it looks like that's probably going to happen." Hearing this, Karl just chuckled, sat back in his seat and shook his head desperately, as if he had heard a good joke. It was not until Master Lucius wanted to ask again that he interrupted by shaking his hand. "It seems you still have some morals, Mr. Malfoy, which is a shortcoming that needs to be overcome, but I will not focus on that today. In the future, don't ask such stupid questions again. When you return, immediately set up a new financial institution company. From now on, for all the loans our foundation has made, we will only charge 5% interest from them, and the rest will be in the loan account. It will be a financial product with an annual return of 15% and sold to the public by that new company. The Ministry of Magic is said to have stored a lot of money in Gringotts. That money just sits there day after day without any return, and a considerable management fee is paid every year. Then, why not invest? So do the other pureblood families. We can give them a way to make a fortune." Chapter 78 Answer. Hearing this, Lucius felt his throat was not dry but tight. He stared at Karl blankly. The handsome young man in front of him was really too hard for him to understand. Based on what his son had said to him in school, Karl is more like a naughty child who likes to play pranks on his classmates and teachers. He makes big news from time to time, but generally speaking, apart from being a bit naughty, he is a nice guy. But during the time I spent with him, this boy was as cold as a machine. He always said things in a calm tone that made him shudder, like these few short words now. But it scared him. He could predict that if Karl's plan was really carried out, it would not take more than 2 years at most. The entire British wizarding world will fall into complete chaos, and this chaos will be completely different from that during the Voldemort era. It will be more difficult because it does not come from the threat of violence, but from the greed within every human heart. Lucius' hands began to tremble at the thought. Seeing this, Karl, who was standing by, smiled, took out a cigarette from his cigarette box, and handed it to him. Watching the other person holding it in his trembling lips, he then took out an extremely exaggerated pure gold lighter engraved with the Hohenzollern family emblem, slid the flint, and lit it for the other person himself. Lucius took a trembling puff of the cigarette in front of him, and was choked by the pungent smoke, and coughed continuously. Karl stood aside, looking at the other person quietly, his smile never fading, until the nicotine began to take effect. He spoke slowly, letting Lucius's face begin to turn red. "Regarding the question you asked me before, I think I can give you the answer now. Why can't muggles get rid of tobacco? Why can't they let go of things when they know that they will make his life worse and worse, or even threaten their lives? Because, quite simply, they are not fighting against a handful of plants. They are fighting against their lives. In this arena called life, most people are destined to be losers from the moment they are born. The only difference is how long they can last on this stage." After Karl finished speaking, he slid the flint, lit a cigarette for himself, took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "So, put away your timidity and cowardice. You have already sat at the poker table, and there is no possibility of withdrawing. If you do as I say, you will gain wealth that you can never imagine in your lifetime, just as I promised. As for the chaos that may arise in the future, this is not something you should worry about. After all, chaos is a ladder that can bring people who are at a high altitude down to the ground. It can also give people on the ground a chance to reach heights they have never dared to imagine. Don't you want to take the Malfoy family a step further, Lucius? Now completely understood why the mermaid singing always led lonely sailors to death point. Because that kind of temptation was simply irresistible. Karl's voice seemed to have entered the depths of his mind without passing through his eardrums. The temptation was so strong that he couldn't resist it at all. He wanted to improve so much. He took a deep drag on the cigarette in front of him until the tobacco burned out and burned his fingers. He threw it away and took a few deep breaths, allowing the deadly smoke to completely pass through his lungs and blend into his blood. He suddenly stood up and nodded. Yes, sir, I will do my best. After saying that, he was about to turn around and leave, but Carol stopped him, waited for the other person to turn around, and threw the cigarette box and lighter over to him. I think you may need these things in your future life, so I'll give them to you as a gift. After all, Halloween is coming soon. Happy holidays, Mr. Malfoy. I hope the holiday gift you give me will be enough to impress me. Hearing this, Lucius nodded silently, but couldn't help but look down at the lighter and cigarette case in his hand. Needless to say, he had seen the lighter before, but the pattern on the cigarette box was very special. An equilateral triangle with a circle in the middle and a straight line running through it. The Deathly Hallows. This is a very rare pattern. And under the sterling silver cigarette box, there was a line of German engraved. Fergrams, air interesse. For the greater good. Lucius looked at the words and savored them carefully. He felt that they were indeed good. If used as a slogan, they were still very elegant and profound. He didn't realize that, while he was standing there looking at the cigarette box, Dumbledore had finally finished his work at some point. He had just arrived at the door of the principal's office, and when he saw the cigarette box, his eyes started twitching. When Lucius looked up, the old man's eyes seemed to be welded to the cigarette box. He was startled by the sudden appearance of Dumbledore and found that the other party had been staring at his cigarette box. For some reason, he opened the cigarette box as if possessed, took out a cigarette, handed it over, and asked tentatively, "Would you like one, Principal?" This sentence woke up Dumbledore, who was still in a daze. He couldn't help but smile awkwardly and waved his hands to refuse. Then he walked quickly towards the principal's office alone. Lucius, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but feel relieved when he saw Dumbledore's agile steps, as if he was 10 years younger. It seems that the principal is healthier than he thought, and he should be able to be tormented by Karl a few more times in the headmaster's office. Karl, who was about to leave, saw Dumbledore rushing over. "I thought that the other party had just finished a job for me, so I wanted to say hello to him and ease the tension between us." But before he could open his mouth, Dumbledore spoke angrily. "Mr. Hohenzollern, how could you do this? How could you smoke and drink in the headmaster's office? I will deduct points from Hufflepuff House." Karl, with a head full of question marks, looked at the old man in front of him in confusion, wondering what was wrong with the other man. Why did he come to pick a fight with him as soon as he entered the door? Isn't it just increasing your workload? Isn't it to show the value of being a principal? It's fine that you don't know how to be grateful, but why do you act like this when we meet? Cole was completely confused, and at the same time, he always felt that this old guy must be hiding something from him. The other party probably knows my life experience very well. If you want to play the mastermind game with me, you are still a little naive. So Carol pretended to be nonchalant, crossed his legs deliberately, and said disdainfully, "Go ahead, deduct more. If you deduct less, don't blame me for looking down on your principal. We Hufflepuffs have plenty of everything except points. You can deduct any points you like. Anyway, no matter how you calculate it, it's not our turn to win the college cup. You can deduct points as you like, but it's such a serious violation of discipline. The punishment must be greater. How about deducting 100 points? If that doesn't work, then 200 points is fine." Chapter 79. Historical Laws of the Magical World. Dumbledore looked at Karl, who was sitting with his legs crossed, feeling somewhat annoyed, but helpless. Carol's face was full of arrogance, and he looked at the old man in front of him quietly, as if saying, "I just like the way you are, hating me to the core, but being unable to do anything to me." In fact, this cannot be entirely blamed on Dumbledore. The problem is very simple. Just as Karl said before, as things like the House Cup have developed to the present day, the only ones who really want to compete for it every year are Slytherin and Gryffindor. Slytherin houses for the so-called glory of purebloods, and the little lions of Gryffindor simply dislike Slytherin. For the sake of face, you must never lose to the other party. Ravenclaw was originally the most promising competitor, but since Karl improved many magics and created many incredible magical miracles, Ravenclaw students now spend almost every day in the library. As for Hufflepuff, which has the largest number of people, there is no need to say more. The attitude of the little badgers is always, what is the Academy Cup? What College Cup? What cup to learn? I don't know. Does it have anything to do with us? Did you lose points today? It seems like it's deducted, and I even feel sad about it. Should I eat more at noon? Being able to deduct points for yourself and eat 3 more bowls of rice is already the greatest respect for this collective honor. If it weren't for Karl's Hearthstone plan and the monthly and weekly exams and grade ranking plan he suggested to Professor McGonagall, I'm afraid the academic atmosphere at Hogwarts will always be lax. So, if a classmate comes to Karl to complain or confide in someone, he will always respond with a gentle and patient attitude and have a good talk with the other person. But when facing Leodang, his attitude is always so bad. To ask this guy to eat and do nothing every day, just get paid but not work. Although Karl thinks so. He is a capitalist whose moral sense is challenged, but deep in his heart, he always remembers this sentence: distribution according to work is the principal point. If you want to eat for free without working, don't even think about it. After hesitating for a while, Dumbledore realized that he had no other choice but to sit down opposite Karl. He looked at the other person worriedly, took a deep breath and asked, Mr. Hohenzollern, what exactly do you want to do? I really can't understand the meaning of what you are doing, although I can't see through your heart. I have a very obvious feeling that you don't have that strong desire for money, but why are you so eager to pursue that money? Faced with Dumbledore's almost showdown-like questioning, Karl did not intend to hide anything, but it was not because he had lost his vigilance, but it was because he knew that the old man in front of him was a good man. After all, when he faced Voldemort, he had thought about converting him. Compared to that lunatic, what I did was much better, so he said it without hesitation. This is the way you think. It is the biggest difference from the Muggle world. Or, your way of thinking is still stuck in the Middle Ages, dear Headmaster. Hogwarts is a wonderful place. I would like to live here with these lovely students. Playing some pranks and laughing every day makes me happy. When they grow up, I can have a romance with some of the pretty girls there. It's okay to roll in the sheets, but I know very well that just like my current identity as a prisoner, there will be a day when I will be released after serving my sentence. This school is not my home. After saying that, Carol calmly took out the same cigarette box he had given to Lucius from his arms, took out a cigarette from it, and put it in his mouth. He snapped his fingers, lit it with magic, then took a deep breath and slowly exhaled the smoke. He spoke lightly through the layer of white smoke. My destination is another world, where the goal of capital growth is to continue to grow, because only in this way can we continue to expand and hold the power of capitalists. No matter what time it is, the triangle of power that rules over mankind is always supreme knowledge, absolute huge profits, and astonishing wealth. This cannot be changed, just like your current position. This is why you have such a high prestige in the British wizarding world. Besides the fact that you have lived long enough, the most important identity is that you are the headmaster of Hogwarts and the leader of all wizards in the British wizarding world. Whether they are officials of the Ministry of Magic or ordinary people, they have all been educated by you. Whether you are willing to admit it or not, the only common identity between them is that they were all your students. This identity also brings you great prestige and power. That's the power of knowledge. It's there whether you want to use it or not. As he spoke, Karl flicked the ash off his cigarette and looked at Brido's complicated expression. He could imagine the old man in front of him. At this moment, he was very conflicted and probably wanted to refute himself, but he couldn't because Cole wasn't lying this time. He wasn't even acting. He was just stating a simple fact point after making sure that the other party had nothing to say. Carol continued, as for the Voldemort you once worried about, there is another branch below, one of the freaks of power, violence. But have you ever thought that the reason why Voldemort succeeded was never because of how evil Voldemort himself was? It's because, in this seemingly beautiful utopia, there is a group of people who always believe in wizards who possess magic. They are two completely different species from muggles, who can't do magic. There are conflicts and discrimination between pure-blood wizards and muggle-born wizards. Because of this deep-rooted contradiction, a freak and psychopath like Voldemort who only knows how to use violence was born. Even without him, as time goes by, a Dark Lord will always be born. This is an inevitable historical inevitability. At the end of his speech, Karl clasped his hands together, assumed the classic Sherlock Holmes thinking posture, and looked calmly at Dumbledore in front of him. Dear Principal, you have lived for more than a century. I don't believe that you have a wealth of knowledge. Even if you have never studied, you won't understand what I just said. I think you know better than anyone else that what I just said is just a fact. But the entire magical world, including you, is nothing but a bunch of cowards who are escaping. You dare not face this fact. I don't dare to face it. The current magical world has come to an end. If no one leads them to make changes, the only ending of this world is destruction. The result will not change, but the process may be different, no matter which psychopath is ruling it. No matter what else happens, it cannot change the ending. The life of the magic world has entered the countdown. Chapter 80, Dispute over Christmas. Karl's words not only made Dumbledore completely silent, but also made all the portraits in the headmaster's office silent. The portraits, which usually chatter away, also fell silent. They crowded into a small picture frame under the principal's desk, all raised their heads, and looked at Carol. They looked so neatly arranged, like a group of penguins ready to be fed. Neither Dumbledore nor these portraits had ever thought like Karl. In other words, the vast majority of people in the entire British wizarding community simply regarded Voldemort and his followers as they are classified as the evil side, and Dumbledore and his Order of the Phoenix are regarded as the righteous side. The complexity of human nature does not exist in this contest. Everything is like a classical drama, a conflict between justice and evil, and justice ultimately triumphs over evil. But Karl never thought so. As an aspiring young man who had been educated by that great man. As a young man who had learned the greatest dragon slaying technique in the world, he understood this very clearly. Everything has its own laws of development, and everything has two sides. Absolute justice and evil only exist in fairy tales. Accepting the grayness of the world, accepting the complexity of this world, and then facing it bravely is the real growth point. So Karl did not mock the old man in front of him as he usually did, but just sat quietly opposite him and smoked. Waiting for the other party to sort out his thoughts. Time passed by minute until a melodious bell rang from the castle's bell tower. Karl packed up his things and prepared to leave, but before leaving he couldn't help but turn back, took out a piece of parchment, and handed it over. I think you have plenty of time to think. After all, there is not much for you to do in this office. It's good to use the time you spend eating candy to think about some valuable issues. I praise it for that, but I need you to sign something now. Don't worry, it's not a scam contract, it's just a letter of consent. I will need to leave Hogwarts for a while over Christmas to serve as my guardian in the wizarding world. I need your signature. These words pulled Dumbledore back to reality from his whirlpool of thought. He looked at the parchment in front of him. And Carol said what he had said before, pouting and saying it in a bit of a tantrum. Christmas is a time for families to reunite. I think you should stay in Hogwarts and celebrate the holiday with all the students. Kit, I think this should be considered your home. Having said that, Dumbledore paused, turned to look at Karl, and asked in confusion, you want me to sign this? Do you want to go to Germany during Christmas? Hearing this, Cole was a little confused, but when facing Dumbledore, he didn't know why he always liked to joke with the old Dumbledore in front of him. So he nodded smoothly and said, yes, I'm going to Germany. I'm going to spend Christmas with Aunt Rosia. She is my only relative in this world. If you don't want to sign, take it away right now. Dumbledore suddenly lost his temper, and his previous pensive state disappeared without a trace in an instant. The old man stood up angrily, threw the parchment on the ground, then turned his head away from Carol, his chest heaving with anger this time. Cole was really at a loss. He looked at Dumbledore dimly, and smiled helplessly. He picked up the parchment from the ground, walked slowly to the other person's side, wanting to look at the other person's face and talk. But I didn't expect this old man to be so stubborn. No matter where I went, he would turn his head to the other side. Seeing that the other party was starting to lose his temper, Karl had no choice but to lower his posture. After all, he had calculated it himself. The only way for me to earn points now is to earn money from my Hogwarts classmates. He calculated carefully and found that at the current rate, the wealth held by students was too scarce. Even with the support of Slytherin's group of wealthy local people, the number is far from enough, and it is close to Christmas. Hogwarts would probably be drained dry by itself, and the students wouldn't be able to pay even a single galleon. But if we want to expand the business to the entire magical world, we must have at least 100 million points. By then, we will still be at least 10 points away from that goal. I must think of a way to fill this hole as soon as possible. He made an exception and asked the dog system, but the dog system said it was powerless and suggested that he could continue to tease his teachers and classmates, violate school rules, and cause havoc in school to quickly increase points. But who is Karl? How could he destroy the kind and perfect image of himself in the hearts of his teachers and classmates just for a few points? So he chose another more gentle path, which was the bargaining chip that all villains and demons could not refuse, the souls of innocent people. He has already negotiated terms with the system. One person's soul in exchange for 100 points. That's why he planned to leave Hogwarts this Christmas and get 1000 souls. Perhaps he didn't expect that the old man would be so dissatisfied with him going to Germany. There must be some unspeakable secret. I must find out more about this, but for now, I should try to coax this old child. After all, he is still my guardian in name. So Carol lowered his tone and spoke calmly. Don't be so angry, Principal. If you have such a problem with that, then I won't go to Germany. I can go to other countries. Then you have no objection, right? And I can give you any Christmas present you want, and forgive part of your debt, okay? Or anything else, no problem, we can discuss it. Hearing this, Dumbledore became even angrier. Was he that kind of person? This guy actually insulted him with money. What? Taking pictures with 500 people who bought flying brooms for 99 galleons a day, isn't that work? How can it be confused with the same thing? Besides, most of them are his own students. Is there anything wrong with the principal taking photos with his students? I won't do something I don't want to do, just for money. Dumbledore, who completed the moral loop for the first time, suddenly became tough in his tone. He looked up at Karl and said angrily, "Don't use your money to insult me. I don't need any gifts. I only have one condition, to be your guardian. I'm your parent, so you must spend Christmas with me." When Carol heard this, he couldn't help but laugh or cry, but he was sharp-sighted and still noticed it. Although the old man in front of me said this in a tough tone, there was a sad pleading look in his eyes. He lowered his head and thought carefully for a moment, then nodded calmly. "Okay, I agree to your request. We can drink a glass of eggnog together then, but let me make this clear first. I have to make or select the dishes. You love sweets so much, and I really can't stand the sweet taste." Upon hearing this, a smile immediately appeared on Dumbledore's face. The old man's expression changed so quickly, just like his hand signing. He quickly signed his name on the parchment, then immediately stopped smiling and pointed at the door. "Hurry up, this is my office." Faced with this kind of behavior of destroying the bridge after crossing it, Karl cooperated by raising his hands high and smiling. "Okay, you're the principal, I'll give the office back to you." However, before leaving, Karl, who was standing at the door, pointed to a floor-to-ceiling mirror placed at an angle on the other side of the desk. The mirror was very tall and most of it was covered by velvet cloth. Carol pointed at the mirror and kept shaking his head. "The reason why memories are memories is that they cannot be undone. If you really regret the past, all you can do is to forget it as quickly as possible. Of course, if you can't forget it, then be brave and take it back. No matter what you have to face, whether it's your own heart or this damn world, if you're afraid of being alone, I can be with you. Karl's words made Dumbledore silent. He looked up at the motionless velvet cloth and recalled a person's voice in his mind. That handsome young man once said this to himself. I never regret anything I did, even if it caused me pain. Dear Al. Chapter 81 CEDRIC and -039 S request. Time flies, and the little wizards will soon usher in their first festival in Hogwarts. Halloween is approaching without us noticing. This festival is quite important in the West Point, whether it is muggles or wizards. At least when it comes to celebrating holidays, humans can always reach a rare consensus at Hogwarts. The school holds a grand party on the night before Halloween every year. When the little wizards woke up this morning, they could smell the sweet and tempting aroma of roasted pumpkin just in the corridor. The little badgers of Hufflepuff were already impatient. They took out the roasted pumpkins they had carved from various corners. Like magic, it is placed in the corner of the public lounge, so that the lounge, which usually has fresh air, is now shrouded in a sweet and tempting scent. Karl sat on the sofa, stirring the pumpkin juice in the glass with a spoon, looking straight at Cedric across from him. He took a sip and said with a smile, "My dear senior, is there anything I can do for you? If not, I still have to go to class, although the professors will obviously not have any real teaching content today. It is still not good to skip class. I am the role model of our college and I must always take the lead." Hearing this, Cedric's cheeks twitched wildly. He also knew that what Carol said was true. Most of the professors today would not have any formal teaching content. Whether students are from the senior or junior grades, they only play some small games in class to pass the time. Of course, except for Professor Snape's classes. Since he took over the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, the good days of all students are over, which is different from Professor Quirrell's teaching method of just chanting. Professor Snape's teaching method can be described as wild. Everyone just puts aside the textbooks and starts practicing. Various powerful spells were released at will, and students started practicing directly in class. It was not so bad for students in lower grades after all. They only know some mischievous spells. It will be miserable for senior students as there are always students in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. It is common to accidentally hurt yourself or even break a bone, but this is not the case for Professor Snape, the master of potions. It's nothing, because with Karl's presence, he has also reaped a lot of rewards recently, and he is Professor Snape, who has money. It can be said that he took from the people and used it for the people. He spent a huge amount of money to buy various raw materials and brewed pot after pot of powerful healing potions. No matter who it is, no matter how badly injured they are, they will be fed a bottle of caterpillar slime like potion. I guarantee that you will still be full of energy the next day, but the smell of the medicine will be gone. All the students who drank it shed tears of emotion. Thinking back to the experience, Cedric felt so moved that he wanted to cry. But right now, he had more important things to do. He looked at Carol, rubbing his fingers nervously, and hesitated for a long time before speaking. "I'd like to ask you for a favor. Could you please sponsor Hufflepuff House and get us a batch of brand new Absolute Blade #1 flying brooms? Those guys in Slytherin House are really bullying. All of them have the latest flying brooms. It's so unfair," Cedric complained angrily, but Karl sat on the fishing platform, tasting his pumpkin juice and shaking his head without even raising his eyelids. "Dear senior, I hope you can use your smart brain more when speaking. Why is it that once you get along with your classmates, your brain's IQ drops so quickly, just like the pumpkin behind you?" "What do you mean?" Cedric was a little confused. This guy even turned around and looked at the pumpkin head behind him. "After comparing them carefully, I feel that there seems to be no similarity between my head and this pumpkin head." Karl couldn't help but stroke his forehead and shook his head at this extremely naive act. "Stop comparing me, you idiot. I mean your head. It looks big, but it's actually just delicious. It has no practical effect at all. The students of Slytherin College are all my big clients. They contribute so much to my career. Why Should I meddle in other people's business? Hearing this, Cedric opened his mouth in surprise, looked at Carol, and didn't say a word for a long time. After holding it in for a long time, he suddenly said, "How could you do this? I have given so much to you, and everything I have done for you is from the heart. You abandoned me just for money, you bastard." Cedric's roar made Karl look puzzled, and even made the little badgers who were about to leave the common room and go to class stop in their tracks. They gathered at the door of the common room, looking at the two big boys with wondering eyes among them. Hannah was even more excessive. She took out her little notebook early and prepared to record everything point in this regard. Carol was really helpless, seeing the innocent and cute little girl before Pointy is almost becoming the leader of his anti-fans. Whenever Karl thinks of it, he can't help but sigh point. But he knew very well that all these bad consequences were due to the guy in front of him who always said nonsense points doing some ridiculous things. He really doubted that Cedric's IQ and X seemed to be completely different things. His brain seemed to be single core and could only handle one thing at a time point, seeing that the crowd was getting bigger and bigger. In order to avoid having his good image ruined by the fool in front of him point, Karl could only speak half-heartedly. "Mr. Diggory, please take back what you just said. I'm not a heartless person. I just want you to understand, I'm not a pushover. If you want me to do something for you or to negotiate with you, please give me your price first. You can understand me as a devil. When making a deal with a devil, you always have to pay something." Cedric had a strange expression when he heard this. He thought for a long time, and two red clouds appeared on his fair face. Pointy lowered his head and whispered, "No, I can't make a deal with you. The clothes you gave me last time were too shameful, and you even made it worse. The front and back of the dress are without fabric. I will never agree to this condition." Although this guy's voice was very low, the public lounge, which was usually noisy, was unusually quiet at this moment. Point seeing Cedric saying this with his head down, Carol felt sick. Point however, the little badgers behind him all had flushed faces with excitement, especially when Karl turned around and discovered point there were a few boys who looked at him strangely on a daily basis. When their eyes were almost thread-like, Carlton felt that something was wrong. Pointy simply held Cedric's head with both hands, forced it up, and kept shaking it while shouting loudly, "What are you thinking about? Get rid of the garbage in your mind. I'm telling you again, those clothes are not for me to see. That's modeling, that's fashion style. It's about making money, that's work. You are not allowed to have different ideas, not even a thought. I just want to make this Christmas a happy one for you. Come with me alone. I have something important to do." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 80 to Karl 039's Willfulness. Cedric was sprayed in the face and his mind was a little confused. Point he stood there stupidly until Karl let go of his head. Point. Just as Cole was about to turn around and leave, he and the other little badgers who were eating melons were also about to go to class. I don't know if this guy has lost his mind or what, or maybe he is afraid that Cole will turn against him and deny his promise. Point suddenly shouted loudly, "You said that as long as I accompany you to spend the holiday alone, you will not drag me to your dormitory alone again. Go. Try to wear clothes that make people speechless." These words were like a collective spell that immobilized everyone who had already reached the door of the common room. Point they all stopped and looked up at Karl, who was walking in front of the team with extremely strange eyes. Karl's mentality exploded a little, and he suddenly wanted to cast a killing curse on the other party. Point, and then he immediately ran away. The current situation was even more painful than killing him. He really couldn't understand it. Point why is it that Cedric, such a smart and professional man, once the topic of conversation involves Quidditch? Point this guy's IQ and EQ will drop to an infinite level. Point if Professor Quirrell had not been hiding in the corner of the infirmary, he would have been a little suspicious. Could it be that Voldemort had cast some kind of magic on this guy? At the same time, Carol was also very clear that the current situation could not be explained at all, and the more he explained, the more confusing it would become. As for his own disobedient subordinates, he would definitely teach them a lesson when Christmas comes. As for those who have seen things they shouldn't have seen and heard things they shouldn't have heard, I also have ways to deal with them. Afterwards, Cole went to the classroom without saying a word. His dark face and the aura he exuded seemed to have the words "I'm unhappy" written on his face. Hermione, Harry and Ron even came over to comfort Karl during class, but she was stopped by Hannah, the leader of Karl's haters. The girl was full of joy and was ready to tell her story again. If Karl hadn't discovered it halfway and came to stop them, he could guarantee that the two Weasley brothers would be. She would invite a large group of onlookers to celebrate her marriage to Cedric. In order to put an end to this idea, Cole went to the auditorium alone. Immediately after the afternoon class, I happened to see Professor Flitwick and Hagrid, who were busy decorating the auditorium. The two men, one big and one small, were busy all the time. The disparity in their body shapes makes their collaboration look very funny. Do you have any ideas, Mr. Hohenzollern? As soon as he saw Karl, Professor Flitwick immediately greeted him with a smile, pulled him over, and pointed towards the auditorium, and asked. Karl could be said to like this professor the most. Although Professor Flitwick was short in stature, he was an absolute giant in thought. He is innocent and full of energy, always attracted by new things. In comparison, an old bee who only hides in the principal's office seems a little lifeless. Cole was never stingy when it came to Professor Flitwick's invitation. He pulled out his wand and waved it twice. Silvery white starlight began to appear in every corner of the auditorium, and after the light faded, pieces of fragrant pumpkin pie were revealed. The silky chocolate forms the walls of the building, while the colorful candies become the surrounding decorations. The sweet candies turned into thorns and vines, entwining around the auditorium, and red roses made of cream and chocolate. The flowers bloomed beautifully, and in a moment, the whole auditorium turned into a candy house in a fairy tale. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly roasted wheat and chocolate candies. It's brilliant. Your imagination is beyond imagination. Looking at the changes around him, Professor Flitwick was extremely happy and jumped up and clapped his hands vigorously. Hagrid was also very excited. He strode to a large bread pillar, stretched out his hand, and wanted to taste it. But he was quickly stopped by Professor Flitwick. You can't eat it, Hagrid. It's made of magic. What you're picking off could be a piece of wall plaster. Hearing this, Hagrid scratched his head awkwardly and looked at Cole with an awkward smile. Carol waved his hand and spoke mysteriously. Don't doubt what you see. I have asked the house elves to prepare everything. This is all made of real food. What I just performed can't be considered magic. It's just a little trick. Today is a wonderful festival, so of course we need delicious food to help. Hearing this, Hagrid was very happy. He opened his big mouth and bit the pillar. Sure enough, in an instant, the fragrance of wheat enveloped his throat. The freshly baked bread is fluffy and soft, and has a unique flavor when chewed. After Hagrid was the first to try the crab, as night fell, little wizards from other academies also came one after another. Looking at the surrounding environment, everyone made various exclamations. At the same time, Headmaster Dumbledore brought other professors. He also came to the auditorium. This old guy specially changed into a violet starry sky robe today. Dumbledore's beard made a special statement as he looked at the great hall in front of him, which was full of Hufflepuff characteristics. A happy smile immediately appeared on my face, and I thought to myself that this kid still loves this school. But before he could be happy for long, Karl at the side immediately announced loudly, "Thank you for your praise. As you can see, the auditorium has turned into a huge candy house. There are a lot of things in there that are edible. You can try them, but there are some things that I didn't turn into food, so be careful when you eat it." Karl's words immediately aroused the interest of many students present, especially after Hagrid once again demonstrated how fluffy and soft the pillar in front of him was. The curious students, like chicks hearing the dinner signal, ran around the auditorium like crazy. The boys were not picky and just grabbed something and put it into their mouths, whether it was a knife and fork or a plate. Some people even don't let go of the skulls on the chandeliers. Girls are more meticulous, and tend to pick out some exquisite candies. The red roses blooming among the vines are their main targets of competition. Soon, the entire auditorium turned into a sea of joy, and most professors had an open mind towards this scene. Even Professor Flitwick was directly involved, and Professor McGonagall tried to bite the wine glass in front of her and swallow it. Only Dumbledore was happy at first. But after he bit a hole in his own headmaster's golden cup and tasted it immediately, he seemed to lose interest in all the candies. He sat alone in his seat, looking at Cole with dim eyes. Karl stood at the door of the auditorium, looking sternly at the students and professors who were ready to devour the entire auditorium. Until he was sure that all the students, especially those who had been in the Hufflepuff common room this morning. After tasting all the candies in front of him, he turned around and prepared to leave leisurely. At the same time, without leaving a trace, he handed a check for 10,000 gold galleons to Professor Snape, who had been standing next to him. He asked in a low voice, you sure that the forgetfulness potion mixed in the food can make him forget it 100%? Something they shouldn't see. Faced with doubts, Snape calmly took the check and snorted coldly, I have no right to comment on your quirks, but feed everyone in the school food containing forgetfulness potion. You are a real devil, Herr Hohenzollern. Hearing this, Carol said disdainfully, I'm not a devil. I just hope some people's brains don't remember useless things every day. It's just a little willfulness. Just a little willfulness, Professor. Besides, I trust your skills. I just deleted some insignificant things from their memories. For those who are not involved, it won't have any impact, except that they can sleep better tonight. This method is already very gentle. If it were in the Muggle world, if someone saw something they shouldn't have seen and spread the word, I have already sent people to dig out their eyes and cut off their tongues. In comparison, this is extremely gentle. Chapter 83, Helpless Dumbledore and the Daily Prophet. 3 days before Christmas, Karl, who had just finished class, was walking in the corridor on the way to the principal's office. He looked at the little tail following him with some impatience. Dear Mr. Potter, could you please not follow me? I can assure you that Professor Snape certainly does not have the time to spare. Go think about the treasure in the secret room on the 4th floor. As for Ron, who is in solitary confinement, I think the only way is to do it. Just try to keep your distance from him. If he can't help but hug you again, it won't be as simple as confinement. Karl, standing at the door of the principal's office, looked at Harry in women's clothes with helplessness written all over his face. Ever since Halloween night, when I was willful and cast a forgetfulness spell on all the teachers and students in the school. In order to prevent that old man Dumbledore from coming to him to nag him again, Karl found him in advance to negotiate terms. In order to make the whole thing smaller, Dumbledore initially acted like a headmaster. He refused to let it go and said something harsh like, Carol's behavior was extremely bad and must be dealt with seriously. In the end, Karl offered 10 golden velvet coins as compensation for each head and gave it to the principal for distribution. The old man reluctantly agreed and also asked himself not to cause trouble in school again, saying that this was the last time. After all, this guy still wanted to carry out his own evil plan of training a savior, so he became the old man's number one tool. Professor Snape was forced to take on the role of villain again, which not only destroyed the little goodwill that he had cultivated with Harry, but also ruined it completely. Moreover, he became the other party's number one suspect and was forced to embark on the path of playing the villain again. As for Ron, it was just the other party's carelessness after Gryffindor won the Quidditch match against Ravenclaw. He was a little too excited and hugged Harry, who had not yet removed the women's clothing spell. The excitement and affection between them showed that Professor Snape had excellent self-control, as he didn't get hit with Avada Kedavra on the spot. After sending Harry away with a few words, Karl calmly walked into the headmaster's office and glanced at Dumbledore, who was sitting behind his desk eating candy. He walked up to the other person in a very familiar manner, shaking his hands and speaking disdainfully. Okay, dear principal, you can leave now. I need to use this office. Please come back in an hour. Dumbledore looked at Karl in surprise, carefully put away the candy, and stood up out of habit to leave. But after walking up 2 steps, He seemed to have thought of something and quickly turned to look at Carol and asked puzzledly, "That's not right, Mr. Hohenzollern. This seems to be my office. Didn't you promise not to cause trouble in school again?" Facing Dumbledore's question, Karl sat in the headmaster's seat very naturally, raised his head, and looked at him, chuckling. "Dear Principal, I always keep my word. I promised you that I would not cause trouble in school, so I will use this office to receive guests from the Ministry of Magic. This is my target, the British wizarding community. It's not Hogwarts. Please don't worry. It's good that it's not school. It's good that it's not school." Hearing this, Dumbledore seemed to be relieved. He nodded continuously and prepared to leave point. Just as he reached the door of the principal's office, he seemed to remember something, turned his head mechanically, and looked at Carol and asked, "Ministry of Magic, what is your connection with the Ministry of Magic, and what do you want to do in the British wizarding world? I will not allow you to mess around with things." Dumbledore was a little nervous. He thought that Karl had been well behaved for 2 days, and that the boy had finally grown up. "I stopped messing around, only to find that the other party just shifted their target, or they thought the existing stage was too small. Hogwarts could no longer accommodate him, and he had shifted his goal from the school to the entire British wizarding world. How long has he been in the wizarding world? How ambitious is he? Compared with Karl, Voldemort can be considered to be a law-abiding person. Feelings of uneasiness continued to rise in Dumbledore's heart. The old man stood at the door of the principal's office, unwilling to leave for a long time. Karl, who was sitting in the principal's seat, was quite dissatisfied with this, but after spending some time together, he also understood it very clearly. This old man in front of me is soft-hearted and does not respond to hardship. We should give him some benefits to try. So he pretended to be helpless and said, "It's nothing, actually. It's just the fluorescent spell I improved before, and the spell for curing constipation. It has passed the certification of the International Confederation of Wizards, and may be able to obtain a second level mail-in metal. So, the Daily Prophet wanted to interview me, but I was very resistant to such high-profile behavior. If you disagree, Headmaster, I can refuse. But you will need to come forward to explain to Professor McGonagall." After these 2 or 3 sentences, Dumbledore's expression became more and more complicated. How could he not know about this kind of thing? As the headmaster, how come he had not heard any news about this kind of thing? And what the hell is that spell for curing constipation? Considering what happened to Professor Quirrell. Now he was still hiding in the corner of the infirmary corridor. Mrs. Pangley complained to him every day, suspecting that Professor Quirrell would not be able to accept the blow and would commit suicide secretly one day. This little guy really wants to kill everyone. You know, the Daily Prophet is not the journal of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. That is the most famous newspaper in the entire British wizarding world. If it were to be published, Professor Quirrell's reputation would be completely ruined. Thinking of this, Dumbledore couldn't help feeling a sense of sadness like an old man. He shook his head helplessly and prepared to leave. After all, he is the only outsider in the entire Hogwarts, and the other party can guarantee that he will not cause trouble in the school. This is the best I can do. As for Professor Quirrell, please forgive me for being old. Looking at Dumbledore's bleak back, Karl couldn't help feeling a little heartbroken. He wanted to call him and have a good chat with him. I even had the idea of letting Professor Quirrell go. However, I didn't expect that the dog system that I hadn't seen for a long time in my mind would speak again. Congratulations to the host. You have learned the most important principle of villains: to kill them all and issue a special mission. Kill someone and destroy their soul. Completely discredit Professor Quirrell and make him unable to make a comeback in the British wizarding world forever. Special rewards, universal passport and a magic phone. Hearing this, the last bit of conscience in Karl's heart was defeated again in the face of huge profits. Cole was originally thinking about how to get a communication device so that I can move around more conveniently during Christmas. I didn't expect the dog system to be so considerate. Whatever you want, the other party will give it to you. As for Professor Quirrell, I'm sorry, but you've been unlucky enough as it is, so you might as well make another sacrifice. The real villain has the entire magical world in his mind. If one or two professors are destroyed, that's it point. If Professor Quirrell suffers anymore, he will have to bear the blame himself point. Having completed the logical loop, Karl sat leisurely in the principal's seat. In less than a moment, under the leadership of Professor McGonagall point, a middle-aged woman with a curvaceous figure, wearing heavy makeup that makes it difficult to distinguish between human and animal, twisting her indistinguishable waistline point, slowly walked into the principal's office. Chapter 84 Threatening Rita Skeeter. As soon as the middle-aged woman saw Carol sitting in the principal's seat, her eyes lit up, and she asked deliberately, "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Rita Skeeter, and I'm a reporter for the Daily Prophet. You must be Mr. Hohenzollern, right? You are the most unique student in the entire Hogwarts. If I'm not mistaken, the place where you are sitting now is the office seat of the headmaster of Hogwarts. Do you want to be the headmaster of Hogwarts now?" As soon as this question was asked, Professor McGonagall looked displeased, for she knew the reporter in front of her very well. He is not a good person, although she knows Carol's mind, and is definitely not an ordinary child point. But she was also a little scared. She was not afraid that Carol would not be able to withstand the interview point. I'm just afraid that this reporter who doesn't know how to live or die might accidentally offend Karl, and then things would be very difficult point. Professor Quirrell's lesson was still fresh in her mind. It was okay at school, but if she left school, she really couldn't imagine what Cole would do. Karl, who was sitting in the headmaster's seat, saw Professor McGonagall's worry point, said with a smile on his face, "Don't worry, Professor. It's just a few questions. My greatest strength is my honesty. I can answer your question, dear reporter. Yes, of course I want to be the headmaster of Hogwarts. I have this idea. Why should I hide it? Hogwarts has a glorious history, just as great as Headmaster Dumbledore himself, but the future always belongs to the young, and I feel that I'm the only one who will undoubtedly be in the future." Such a frank answer made Rita Skeeter's eyes light up, and she immediately began to record with her magic feather pen point. Professor McGonagall, who was standing by, couldn't help but take a look, and her expression immediately darkened. I saw this annoying guy writing in the notebook beside him. Karl Hohenzollern, the most mysterious student in the history of Hogwarts. His identity is a mystery and his age of admission is different from others. With unparalleled talent and obvious ambition, the third generation Dark Lord actually sits on the headmaster's seat at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall was immediately displeased by such a record that disregarded the facts, and she was about to scold him. Unexpectedly, Karl, who was sitting in the headmaster's seat, just smiled faintly and said to Professor McGonagall, "Professor McGonagall, I think you still have a lot of work to do. I'm not a child. I can still face some things alone. Besides, this is an interview. You can still leave first." Hearing this, Professor McGonagall glanced at Karl, then at Rita Skeeter, who was looking very excited, and sighed secretly in her heart. It is difficult to persuade a damned ghost with kind words, so you'd better not meddle in other people's business. Evil will be punished by evil, so it is good to let the other party suffer a little. Thinking of this, Professor McGonagall nodded, turned and left the headmaster's office. Seeing that Professor McGonagall finally left, Rita Skeeter immediately went all out, walked forward, and started asking Karl frantic questions. But when she got close to Karl, she saw Karl suddenly took out his black dragon spine wand and whispered to her, "Avada Kedavra." Rita Sky was completely stunned as she watched a green light with a breath of death coming straight towards her face. Without time to think, she quickly threw away the things in her hand, turned into a ladybug, and nimbly avoided the death ray. The ray of light hit a teacup behind her, but the expected explosion did not occur. It's just that the teacup turned into an exquisite cake. Seeing this scene, Rita Skeeter felt something was wrong. Realizing that she was being tricked, she turned around and prepared to fly away. However, she didn't expect that before she could flap her wings a few times, a black figure would step firmly on her, who had turned into a ladybug. "Thank you for your hard work, Snape." Karl stroked his raven's back and covered the ladybug firmly in a transparent teacup. He stared at the panicked ladybug through the clear glass and smiled. "Look what I found, an illegal animagus. It seems that the gossips you were famous for before are not worth mentioning. They were all stolen in this way. Rita Skeeter, who turned into a ladybug, wanted to change back into human form, but she kept buzzing around in the transparent teacup for a long time. Unable to perform magic. Karl looked at the ladybug that was running around with its head flying around, and the smile on his face grew wider. No need to waste your efforts. I can develop a new type of flying broom on my own. Then it would be easy to make a teacup that can trap the animagus and transform. No, you understand what I'm saying now. Please listen carefully. You should have investigated my identity. Although I have cleaned up all the traces, I don't want anyone to know too much. If you behave yourself, I can let you go. But if you don't obey, when your interview is published, you will be forced to commit suicide in some dark corner in a strange way. Hanging yourself with your hands tied behind your back, or shooting yourself 8 times in the back are all possible things. You are not my classmate or professor. I'm not in the mood to play boring games with you, so please always remember that the person sitting in front of you is not a student of Hogwarts, but a criminal serving his sentence here. Karl's tone was light, but his expression was terribly cold, like Rita Skeeter trapped in a glass teacup. At this moment, she just felt cold all over, and she turned into a ladybug, flapping her wings frantically. She was now certain that the handsome boy in front of her had been planning to do this since she entered the door, and this was not an interview at all. It was basically a trap set by the other party. But just when she was hesitating, Carol's voice sounded again, and he pretended to have just remembered something. I remember Professor McGonagall saying that animagus is a very dangerous transfiguration. There are many people who have been transformed. I find it very interesting that you never turned back into a human being. So is there a possibility that I can avoid killing you? It would be much more interesting to let you become a ladybug forever and spend the rest of your life buzzing. These words completely frightened Rita Skeeter, and she turned into a ladybug and stopped flying around in the teacup. Instead, it landed quietly and stayed there motionless. Seeing that the other party had surrendered, Karl gently took the teacup away from him, and Rita Skeeter immediately returned to her original form. He gasped and looked at Karl, asking tremblingly, "What on earth do you want to do? Can I pretend that I have never been here today, and please let me go? I can put nothing in the newspaper." Looking at a middle-aged woman with a distorted figure begging in front of him, her face was already hard to tell whether it was human or animal. Cole was twisted into a ball because of fear. In addition to feeling disgusted, he also thought that the other person was really stupid. He slammed the table and shouted loudly, "Who told you I was going to threaten you? Wasn't I just trying to make sense with you? I just wanted to play a joke on you and treat you to a cake. I was just playing a prank on you. Why did you take it so seriously? I didn't do anything, and I didn't say anything. Please remember this. Besides, if a big reporter doesn't come up with any explosive news during an interview, then I'm paying you for nothing, right? Come, let me tell you something about Professor Quirrell." Chapter 85. Accepted as a dog. Karl stood up and pulled out a chair gentlemanly, asking Rita Skeeter to sit opposite him, and then began to recount the story in detail and truthfully. What great contribution did Professor Quirrell make in the magic spell he invented to cure constipation? Thanks to the existence of the Memory Palace, Karl can perfectly describe Professor Quirrell's life after being hit by the curse. The whole process from him to ejaculating in the middle of the classroom was described in great detail. You must report truthfully, not missing any details, and strive to use the power of words. Let all readers perfectly recreate the scene I just described in their minds. Karl said calmly, and at the same time snapped his fingers and pushed a cup of sweet and delicious hot cocoa in front of Rita Skeeter. The old lady looked at the steaming and somewhat sticky dark brown liquid in front of her, and her stomach couldn't help but start to move. He covered his mouth and turned sideways, ready to vomit. "Please note that this is my office. The carpet under your feet is worth hundreds of years. If you accidentally stain it, your year's salary may not be enough to compensate for it." Karl said calmly. Point hearing this, Rita Skeeter suppressed the nausea in her mind and tried hard to control her digestive tract. Point. After trying for a long time, she finally swallowed back what she was about to vomit. She turned her head with a bitter face, looked at the handsome boy in front of her and said helplessly, "No problem, sir. I will do as you say. If there is nothing else, can I leave here?" She really didn't want to stay here any longer, not to mention how disgusting the process Carol had just described was. It was this young man himself that made her feel immense pressure. Point. Carol looked at the bitter-faced aunt in front of him and smiled contemptuously. He probably guessed that the other party should have realized her own status by now. Point. Know what you should and should not do. Since you are willing to listen, then follow the 3 steps of treating, beheading, and accepting as a dog. Point. It's time to give the other party a sweet treat, but before that, I still have to scare her a little. Point. So he asked casually, "I heard that you wrote a story about Dumbledore and the first Dark Lord Grindelwald a long time ago. In your story, you described the two as a pair of lovers who loved and hated each other. This was Grindelwald's original intention, to rule the wizarding world, just to make Dumbledore look at me differently, right?" Hearing this, Rita Skeeter suddenly panicked. She instinctively thought that Cole was looking for her to hold her accountable. Point. He waved his hands hurriedly. "That was just a piece of gossip. If it offended the principal, I'm willing to issue a clarification report immediately. Please, let me go. I will do as you say." When she got excited, the aunt almost knelt down to Carol. Point. But Carol waved his hands repeatedly and pretended to be surprised. "What are you doing? I have never threatened you. There has never been a direct threat in my words. As a journalist, you should always stick to facts. I'm not asking you to issue a clarification report when I raise this issue. I just want you to use your talent to write a piece of gossip about me and Headmaster Dumbledore." Rita Skeeter was completely stunned. She looked at the boy in front of her in disbelief. Point. Her brain froze a little, but this was also the first time she carefully observed Carl's appearance. The golden hair and jewel-like blue eyes with her angular, delicate, and deep facial features. The old lady couldn't help swallowing her saliva in a moment. Point. I've already started to imagine some extremely vulgar scenes in my mind. Point. Carol, who was sitting opposite, also noticed the other person's slight change in expression. His face suddenly turned cold, and he spoke slowly. "If you continue to have such wild thoughts, I will tie your hands and feet and throw you into the Forbidden Forest to be a meal for magical creatures. After all, feeding those magical animals cost me a lot of money." These words immediately brought Rita Skeeter back to reality from her imagination. She awkwardly touched her big face, which looked like it was covered with putty. "I'm sorry, it's just professional custom, but if you want me to do something, please give me a general creative direction. There are still scales that can be created, and I will do my best to help you accomplish them." Hearing this, Carol just said lightly, "There is no limit to the scale. As for the direction of the creation, try to link my mysterious background with our beloved principal. Doesn't he want to be my guardian? Then let him fulfill this responsibility. After all, there is no free lunch in the world. If there is a problem with the ward, he should come out and take some responsibility." He stared into the other person's eyes and said with a smile, "Don't be so nervous. These are just simple things. As long as you help me do it, I will reward you handsomely. Let alone the incident behind this. This is already big news. You didn't return empty-handed today, and after working with me, you will no longer be limited to being just a small reporter. Only by following the right people can you make progress faster, right?" Carl's words made Rita Skeeter's eyes light up, and she finally remembered. The handsome boy in front of me is not just a student. It is no exaggeration. The two hottest topics in the British wizarding world right now are Hearthstone magic cards and the absolute blade #1 broomstick. They were all the work of the other party, including the Wizarding Cornucopia Foundation, which had only been established for less than half a year but had already become quite large in the wizarding world. There was also the other person's shadow faintly behind her. Only now did she understand why Professor McGonagall was so confident in letting her be alone with him. It turns out that from the very beginning, I was not a heavyweight at all compared to the young man in front of me. So she nodded quickly and tried her best to assure him, "No problem, sir. I will go back to my work now and will definitely not let you down, no matter how much Professor Quirrell contributes. As for the relationship between you and Headmaster Dumbledore, I will definitely report it truthfully and objectively." Looking at the other party's sincere assurance, Cal nodded with satisfaction. It seemed that he really got a good dog today. In the public opinion circle of the British wizarding world, there is also a good knife that can be used directly. So he took out a bottle of fine sherry from his ring and personally took out 2 transparent wine glasses. After filling their glasses, they stood up, picked up the glass, and handed it to the other person, then clinked glasses with each other. Wish us happy cooperation, of course. Rita Skeeter was still a little nervous. After clinking glasses, she breathed a sigh of relief, but was still a little curious, so she asked softly, "Dear sir, with your strength, there is absolutely no need to do this. Why did you do this?" Hearing this question, Carol had no intention of hiding it. He shook his wine glass and spoke slowly. "It's actually very simple, because I'm afraid I can't handle all the things I want to do by myself. My current identity is a criminal on bail pending trial. I want to get rid of this identity. I've had enough of playing the game of being a student in school. It's time to do something truly meaningful, so I need a chance to erase the prisoner identity in me. My status as a prisoner is like a flame. I have 2 ways to solve this problem. One is to deliver enough benefits to the Ministry of Magic, just like putting out a fire with water. Another option is to drop a bomb directly on the fire. The explosion will exhaust the air, and the flames will naturally go out. Of the 2 options, I choose the latter." Chapter 86 Grindelwald. December 12th. Christmas Eve. Austria, Nuremberg Castle. Although it is called a castle, this building is more like a huge tower standing in the majestic Alps. There is no human habitation within a radius of dozens of kilometers. The majestic buildings under the reflection of the setting sun make people feel lonely and sad. It was as if the entire building had been forgotten in a corner of this world. The loneliness was not broken until a loud whistle was heard in the sky, and a black figure appeared, like a black sword. It cut through the white cloth of snowstorm in the sky, and flew quickly towards the castle. The other party seemed to be in a playful mood, riding on a flying broom in such bad weather, constantly showing off various difficult skills. With one final emergency brake, the plane landed smoothly in the square outside the castle. He rolled off his broomstick and walked over to a handsome young man, who carefully checked the items he had with him. Then he walked towards the castle excitedly. When he arrived at the castle gate, he couldn't help but look up and look at the line of words on the door frame. He immediately perked up, stood up straight and read aloud, "For the greater good." When he said this, the boy's eyes seemed to be full of brilliance, like a lost person who found his way home. His steps were firm and light as he quickly climbed the stairs toward the top of the tower. Coming to the top floor of the tower, there is a small room with no luxurious decoration inside. The surrounding walls were covered with spots of mildew, and there was no obstruction in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The cold wind blowing from the Alps swept mercilessly into every corner of the room. The wind also made the hair of the old man curled up in the corner of the room flutter. "Master, these are all the issues of the British Daily Prophet for the past month. I brought them to him as you instructed." Looking at the old man, the young man said respectfully with one hand folded across his chest, "You don't have to deliver it in person. You can let the owl do the job. Besides, I'm not your master. You are the international lawyer of Austria, Sebastian Rosier. My time has come to an end." The old man spoke lightly, continuing to squat in the corner of the room, looking at the snow-capped mountains outside the window with empty eyes. But the young man named Sebastian seemed very excited. He hurriedly found the Christmas special issue from a pile of newspapers. He was extremely excited and spoke in a panic. "No, master. The Rosier family will always be your loyal subordinates. And you succeeded. Your magic was successful. Your bloodline has been continued. Our era has not ended, and the young master now controls the entire Hogwarts." That Old man Dumbledore will definitely be defeated by Grindelwald's bloodline. It's no wonder that Sebastian was so excited. Compared to the useless trash in the British wizarding world, being tormented by an idiot who only knew how to kill was quite a hassle point in the entire European wizarding world. Everyone knows that Albus Dumbledore's greatest achievement was defeating his master. Gellert Grindelwald point it was also because of that damn old thing that the master imprisoned himself in this high tower. It also led to the collapse of the then prosperous Saints Church, with many comrades dying or fleeing point as time passed. Grindelwald's reputation was gradually forgotten by the wizarding world point to the extent that a piece of trash of that level appeared in the British magical world and was called the Second Dark Lord by those people in Britain point. Thinking of this, Sebastian became a little angry. Voldemort, this title is quite famous. As a result, this guy accomplished nothing except causing some trouble to old Dumbledore point. What's even more ridiculous is that this bastard actually died at the hands of a child, which really tarnished the name of the Dark Lord point. Sebastian recalled angrily until a loud laugh brought him back to reality. My prediction has come true. Fate has finally started to favor me. Humph. Ow. I'm the winner in the end. I won. Grindelwald laughed wildly, and his hearty laughter continued to echo in the surrounding valley. Sebastian was also extremely excited, and his eyes were a little wet. As a young man who grew up in the Rosier family point, although he is still young, he is a deep-seated supporter of Grindelwald's ideas. The opportunity that his ancestors and parents never waited for has now come to him. He asked tremblingly, Master, you are finally willing to lead us again. What should we do first, and where should we start? The British Ministry of Magic is very far away from us, and there is that old fellow Dumbledore there. It doesn't seem to be a wise choice to go over and confront them head on. How about we take down the Austrian Ministry of Magic first? Master, please rest assured that after years of development, it will not be a problem to take down the Austrian Ministry of Magic. Listening to the other party's loyal speech, Grindelwald couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. To be honest, he had never seriously considered this issue point. After seeing Karl's photo in the newspaper, his first subconscious thought was to return to England as soon as possible. Go meet Dumbledore and tease him a bit. Although he had received Vita's report a long time ago that she had found the child, in his heart he found it a little hard to believe, or perhaps he was a little afraid to face the fact. Nearly half a century had passed, and he had built a high wall in his heart. He hid behind the wall, unwilling to be exposed to what was happening in the outside world. This once high-spirited Dark Lord had long since had his edges smoothed out by time. So much so that when his dream came true, his first reaction was not happiness, but fear and even a desire to escape. To this day, he looks at the newspaper reports, especially after the photo of Karl sitting in the principal's office. Only then was Grindelwald finally willing to walk out of the high wall in his heart and prepare to leave the cage in reality. He took a deep breath, turned to look at the excited young man in front of him, and the expression on his face changed again. In less than a moment, the old man who had just been escaping from the real world seemed to have instantly become 50 years younger. He once again became the Dark Lord who made the entire European magical world tremble. He opened his lips slightly, his tone slow and firm. Don't make this public yet. It's not the time to raise a big flag. I'm going to England first to meet the child. I leave Austria to you. No one is allowed to touch Dumbledore. He belongs to me. Hearing this, Sebastian was extremely excited. He straightened his back, put his right hand on his chest, and shouted loudly, "For the greater good, I will give you my heart, and I will prepare it now." Looking at his subordinates, who turned and left with excitement on their faces, Grindelwald couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed, as he knew his subordinates very well. He liked to think about something in his mind, but it didn't matter to him now. He bent down and picked up the newspaper on the ground. Gently stroking the photo of Dumbledore published in the newspaper, his eyes were empty and blurry. Al, I really missed you. Chapter 87 Ballet and Vodka. December 12th, 24 p.m. Crimean Peninsula. In the People's Dance Theatre, Carol sat quietly in the VIP box on the second floor, listening to Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake Point, admiring the graceful dance of a group of girls in white dresses on the stage. Ballet can be said to be one of the most famous dances in the world. Its light, agile and elegant posture has been recognized by people all over the world. But few people know that this extremely elegant dance was born in Russia, a country famous for its bitter cold across Europe. These beautiful Slavic girls, whether in the palace or on the village streets, they can easily perform the most graceful and agile dance in the world. They spin like the breeze blowing across the Volga River. The speed of the posture change was as fast and neat as the cold wind in Siberia. Cole was quietly admiring this beautiful art, but Cedric, standing beside him, was a little worried. It wasn't because of anything else, but the scenes he saw along the way made him feel uneasy. In the country where he is now, just walking on the streets, the surrounding environment gives people a shaky feeling. Don't worry, the future of these people has nothing to do with us. This is just a choice anyway. Their ancestors created this country with the greatest ideals of mankind, but they gave up their ideals because of the lowest human desires. Starting from the moment they gave up their ideals, this country is already dead, and now we are just waiting for it to die, and we are a bunch of vultures. We are going to wait until the other party dies completely, and then we can share this huge corpse. Karl said calmly. In his hand was a goblet filled with French Bordeaux red wine that looked as red as blood. In the past, only the powerful and wealthy could buy this kind of luxurious foreign liquor in special stores. Ordinary people can only buy it on the black market at prices several times higher than the market price. Or you have to queue for hours at the entrance of the department store. But now, even if you queue up, you can't buy it, even though it is thousands of kilometers away from Moscow. But on this peninsula close to the Black Sea, residents can still feel that the situation is quietly changing. Food supply has not returned to normal for months, and factories produce goods, but don't know who to sell them to. The system for distributing production materials has long been paralyzed, and countless ships are anchored at the port, but are unable to unload their cargo. The currency in people's hands began to depreciate rapidly, even though the official exchange rate did not change. But it is becoming increasingly difficult for people to buy goods at normal prices as before. The cold wind from Siberia finally blew onto this beautiful island, where it is spring all year round. The military feeling was even more obvious. Standing outside the box store was General Vasily Mikhail, who came here for this matter. His troops had not received any news from Moscow and they did not know what their future would be. The soldiers began to become anxious, and even basic military pay and survival guarantees had become unsustainable. They don't know how long the motherland they once swore to defend will last, or even the land they stand on. Who it will belong to is still unknown. General Vasily, who had been hesitating for a long time, finally pushed open the door of the box and walked in slowly. But the moment he entered the door, he was still a little surprised. Two young boys who were no more than 15 or 16 years old. Doubts immediately surged into his mind, and his already slow pace came to a halt. It was not until Carol turned his head slightly and saw the general, who was nearly 50 years old, that he quickly stood up and shook hands with the other party with a smile. "Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Karl Hohenzollern, and the man next to you is my senior, Cedric Diggory. We have been waiting for you for a long time. This wonderful drama is almost coming to an end." Hearing this, General Vasily turned his gaze to the stage below the stage, just as the young man said, "This ballet performance has reached its final stage," and the performers on the stage bowed gracefully. Even though there were only 3 people in the audience, the entire theater was empty and the sight was desolate. General Vasily couldn't help but sigh, as he was a senior fan of ballet art. Whenever he had a day off, he would come to the theater, sit in his own special seat, and enjoy the dance. But now, those dancers who were once highly sought after have long since fallen from the clouds. Many people have had to give up their artistic careers and turn to some basic physical labor in exchange for basic living supplies. There are even many beautiful actresses who, due to financial difficulties, have started to engage in the sex trade. The once elegant art hall has long since turned into a filthy place. Just like the country he had sworn to defend. Without this young man, this performance might not have taken place. He couldn't help but smile bitterly at the thought point he came here ready to sell out the country's assets, doing the very thing he once despised and hated the most point. However, he did not expect that the place of transaction would be the National Art Hall, which he was once most proud of. General Vasily came to his senses and no longer had any hesitation or doubt. He walked quickly to the side and took the seat that had been prepared for him. As soon as he sat down, he got straight to the point. What are you going to buy, and how are you going to pay for it? This direct question made Karl very satisfied. He took out a bottle of Red Star vodka from under the small table beside him. Then he used the small knife he carried with him to cut the seal on the bottle, and Cedric took out the wine glass he had prepared long ago. In less than a moment, 3 small glasses of wine were placed on the small table in front of the 3 people. Karl said, pointing at the drinks, "Don't be in a hurry. Even if it's very hypocritical, I always want to cover the cold transaction with a veil of friendship. You will definitely accept my offer, but as per custom, please drink a glass of my drink first, my dear friend." General Vasily couldn't help but laugh when he saw a child, old enough to be his grandson, saying such words in front of him. But he did not refuse this kindness. After all, even with his current position, he had not tasted this familiar taste for some time. Without any doubt, he picked up a glass of vodka, held it high above his head, and said with a smile, "To the Soviets." Then, he tilted his head back and drank the wine in one gulp. The clear wine flowed down the throat of the Slavic man like a raging fire. His face, which had turned pale due to the cold, finally turned a warm red. Seeing the other drink it all in one gulp, Karl and Cedric also raised their drinks, and Karl even imitated the other and raised the glass above his head. Said with a smile, "Cheers to the end of an era." Chapter 88 and 225. After 3 glasses of wine, the atmosphere between the 3 of them was finally not as cold as before. Karl even called the theater manager over again and generously gave him $10,000. The manager misunderstood the request at first when asking the other party to perform again. He saw that Cole was generous and that the guests he entertained were also men. So he thought that it was $10,000. She wanted him to call up the girls who had just performed and have them perform the art up close in the box. It was not until Karl's loud scolding that the bald man finally came to his senses. Before leaving, he asked with a hint of unwillingness, "Dear sir, are you sure you just want to watch the show? If you don't like the previous batch, we have other actors here." Hearing this question, Cedric immediately looked at Carol, although he didn't quite understand what the manager said. But judging from the other party's inquiries, he probably regarded Karl as a regular customer. Carol's face darkened, and he cursed in his heart. What does this mean? Are you running a ballet troupe or a foot massage parlor? Why change a batch? Do I look like such a vulgar person? Karl, feeling insulted, pointed at the stage angrily. "I just want to see the show. Get out of here right now." Hearing Karl's tough tone, the manager remained silent for a long time and finally took only $100 from the pile of bills. He respectfully handed the remaining money back to Carol, and the flattering expression he had before disappeared without a trace. He said with his back straight, "Welcome to the People's Dance Theater. Our performances are clearly priced and are designed to serve the general public, so please take back the extra money. Thank you for coming." Then he turned around neatly and left the box, looking at the stack of banknotes that were placed back on the table. Karl's expression was a little strange. Cedric was as confused as ever, and General Vasily kept shaking his head while smiling bitterly. Soon as the music sounded again, the actors returned to the stage and the graceful dance was performed again. The actors are still the same, and their movements are still as graceful and calm. Even if it is reasonable to say so. A long ballet performance consumes a lot of physical energy from the actors, but this group of actors worked very hard, striving to show every movement to perfection. The 3 audience members in the box on the second floor also showed enough respect and did not communicate at all. They enjoyed the performance quietly and slowly, and when the curtain fell, the 3 of them gave warm applause. The applause continued to echo in the empty theater, bringing this final performance to a perfect end. General Vasily sat back in his seat, still with the smile on his face. The look he gave Karl no longer had the previous vigilance. He said it very happily. "Thank you Stranger, now give me your price and I will sell you everything you want, but I have only one condition. The weapons I sell cannot be used to harm the people I once protected. This is my last request. Hearing this, Carol nodded in agreement without any hesitation, and even said it half jokingly. Dear General, you may not know my identity yet. I have always been the most wanted criminal in New York State in the United States. I don't work for them. Everything I buy from you will help you achieve the original purpose of the weapons being produced. They will become the force of resistance for those in despair in this world. Carol's words made General Vasily stand there in a daze. He lowered his head and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he looked up with a smile, stretched out his hand and said, "Make a deal. Make a deal." Karl also smiled and shook hands with the other party. At the same time, he took out the magic phone and simply pressed a button. After whispering a few words, he handed the phone directly to General Vasily on the other side. Because the transaction between us is completely against international law. What I trade with you is not cash or gold. Now, send your people to the dock immediately. Someone will meet them. A whole ship will be docking soon. It is loaded with all kinds of food and supplementary foods. Enough for you to get through this difficult time. Oh, and this, too. As he spoke, Carol pulled out an unopened bottle of Red Star vodka from under the table and handed it over with a smile. The source of Soviet power. With the last fig leaf falling, the deal was successfully completed, and Cedric and Karl left first. Only General Vasily was left alone to enjoy those sources of power. Walk out of the magnificent art hall and come to the street late at night. Cedric suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. His previous elegance and indifference seemed to have disappeared completely the moment he walked out of the door. On the streets at night, you can see heavily made up women, drunk old men, and people wearing tattered military uniforms lying casually in the corners of the streets. Young people with nothing to do were constantly moving around the streets, and some of them walked directly towards the women. Some gathered in groups of 3 or 5, whispering something, and from time to time they looked at other people on the street with hateful eyes. The entire street is filled with the ugliest qualities of human nature, undisguised lust and the laziness of escaping from reality. The crowd was wandering around filled with hatred that arose out of nowhere, but Cedric felt as if he was walking on a sinking ship. The people on the ship didn't think about how to save themselves. They just wanted to indulge themselves completely before the ship sank. The 2 men turned several corners and walked into a dark alley, rejecting the advances of several women. The 2 finally found a deserted place and stood face to face, looking into each other's eyes. Karl looked around and made sure there was no one around. Then he checked the time and said anxiously, "Hold me a little. We are going to the next place." Hearing this, Cedric obediently stretched out his hands, but Carol directly slapped one of them away. He stared at the other person angrily and spoke through gritted teeth. "I told you to hold my shoulders. If you put your arms around my waist, I will turn you into a mouse and keep you here forever. Hurry up. There's no time, you idiot." After being scolded, Cedric reluctantly withdrew his right hand from Karl's waist, grabbing the other person's shoulders with both hands. Karl glared at the guy, then took out his wand and waved it lightly. With 2 explosions in the air, the 2 men quickly teleported to an unknown military base. The Red Army soldier on guard saw the 2 young men suddenly appear and immediately picked up the AK-47 in his hand and questioned loudly, "Who are you and why do you suddenly appear here?" Facing the black muzzle of the gun, Cole was very calm. He conjured up his ID out of thin air as if by magic and handed it to the other party along with a pack of kappa and cigarettes. "We were sent by General Vasily to pick up the goods. Here are my credentials." Hearing this, the Red Army soldier quickly started asking questions on the walkie-talkie, and after receiving a positive answer, he immediately put away his gun. He put the cigarette into his pocket without leaving a trace, pointed to the largest hangar in the airport, and said with a smile on his face, "The things you want have been loaded. You can take the plane away anytime now." In response, Karl just nodded lightly and walked quickly to the door of the hangar with Cedric beside him. Looking at the huge hangar door in front of him, Cedric was a little confused. "Shouldn't we take a boat? Can a plane hold all that stuff?" Hearing this, Karl smiled and shook his head, walked alone to the center of the hangar door, and suddenly opened his arms with a dull mechanical sound. The hangar door slowly opened, and an extremely huge plane appeared behind him. Of course not an ordinary plane, but this is no ordinary plane. What you have before you is the pride of Soviet industry, the largest transport aircraft in the world, the An-225. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, The Promised Land. The huge An-225 transport plane made a deafening noise, and its 88.74 meter long wings tore through the clouds like sharp swords. This largest transport aircraft ever designed and built by humans was originally designed to transport the Alliance's Buran space shuttle. It should have been carrying mankind's most glorious and noble ideals of the starry sky, but at this moment it was carrying an entire battalion of killing weapons ready to spread violence and conflict wherever it lands at the same time. As a military transport aircraft, Soviet designers, who have always adhered to the design principle of just being able to use it, certainly could not take the comfort of passengers into consideration. The loud noise made Cedric a little irritated, but what made him even more irritated was everything he saw today. Unlike other muggles, wizards who don't care, being a true Hufflepuff. He has a basic liking for everyone and everything in this world, or a silent Madonna mentality. And because of the environment he grew up in, he has always naively believed that there may really be some very bad things in this world. For example, Professor Snape. In his impression, the strict and harsh Professor Snape is the worst kind of villain he can imagine. But everything he saw along the way completely shattered the worldview he had built over the past decade. This world is so real that it makes people feel scared. I always think of those helpless people and their eyes. Cedric always had an instinctive heartache, and he wanted to tell someone about it, but when he looked up, Karl, who was sitting on the seat opposite, had changed into a black suit at some point and looked neat and tidy. It was just the color of the clothes that always made him feel that Cole was preparing to attend someone's funeral. The frameless glasses on his face completely concealed the remaining tenderness in the other person's eyes through the transparent glass. Cedric no longer saw the usual warm blue color like the Caribbean Sea. All I could see was a hidden anger, like a red hot coal. Karl also quickly noticed Cedric's gaze. He deliberately took off his glasses slowly and changed back to the familiar look of the other party. Smiling and pointing out the window. We are almost at our destination. Let's enjoy the beautiful scenery below. This is the promised land of God in the Bible. Cedric looked out the window, and all he saw was a desolate scene, with only a few dots of light dotting the earth. Especially in places near the sea. The lights here present a very strong sense of fragmentation. Unlike a normal city, where the distribution of lights is like a radiating star, the distribution of lights here seems to have hit a wall. There is always a strange phenomenon, that there is a thin line between bright lights on one side and extremely dark on the other side. Of course Cedric knew why this was the case. He had once read the Muggle books that Karl brought to his dormitory. Although there was a lot of content in it, his intuition told him that he couldn't believe it completely, but there were always some truths hidden among the many lies. But when the facts were verified in this way, his heart was filled with complicated emotions. On the one hand, out of his kind nature, he instinctively felt sad and angry. On the other hand, he had a glimmer of hope that his guess was wrong. He didn't want hell to really exist in this world. But before he could think too much, a sharp alarm sounded from the alarm system of this military transport plane. A warning also came from the radio nearby. You are entering Israeli airspace. Please turn around and leave immediately, or we will take action. The person on the other side repeatedly warned in both English and Russian. The aircraft's radar system also showed that they had been locked by anti-aircraft missiles, and the two crew members at the front of the aircraft also communicated through the intercom inside the aircraft. Asked Karl, "Boss, what should we do? Those lunatics really turned on the fire control radar. Should we turn around and leave?" Karl smiled slightly, picked up the radio beside him, put on his frameless glasses again, and shouted in standard Russian, "This is a Soviet Socialist Union military transport plane, and we are following the orders of the Supreme Soviet fighters for the world's resistance against imperialism, transporting military supplies, and this is not your airspace at all. I only know that the land beneath my feet was called Palestine half a century ago. After saying that, Karl directly cut off the radio communication and shouted on the intercom, "Don't pay attention to them. Prepare to land immediately. I don't have much time. I have to go back and spend Christmas with my parents." After receiving Karl's direct order, the huge An-225 transport plane immediately started the afterburner mode. 6 huge turbofan engines spewed out orange flames and descended to the ground rapidly like a meteor. The dazzling red star at the tail of the plane attracted the IDF F-16 pilot who was trying to approach it again and again. They never had the courage to press the fire button and could only watch helplessly as this huge iron bad was destroyed right under their noses quickly descend towards the ground. This flying beast crossed the sea with wind and thunder, and the powerful power of the aircraft caused huge waves on the calm sea. At the moment of approaching the runway, the headlights on the plane suddenly lit up like the eyes of a giant beast. The giant tires, taller than an SUV, rubbed violently against the cinder track. Flashing dazzling sparks, the fuselage began to shake violently, and Cedric, sitting in the cabin, felt like he was not on a plane. Instead, it felt more like jumping off a building. Until the last 50 meters, when 6 giant engines began to push in reverse at full power. The scorching hot gases rolled up layer upon layer of smoke and dust, and finally before the runway ran out, the steel behemoth braked its huge body. As soon as the plane stopped, Cedric couldn't hold it in any longer and started vomiting. As soon as he got off the plane. It was not until he finished vomiting and looked up that he realized that this was not a runway at all. It was just a relatively flat river valley. After it dried up, no one knew where the steel giant flew into. Just as he was shocked, Karl jumped off the plane gracefully, and the 2 pilots also hurried down. As soon as the 2 men landed on the ground, they held onto the rock wall and began to vomit frantically. Seeing this, Cedric couldn't help but admire and nodded. Their flying skills are really superb. They must be the best pilots to land in a place like this. One mistake and we're all screwed. Hearing Cedric's admiring tone, Karl just turned his head slightly and glanced at the 2 pilots who were still vomiting. Then he waved his hand and walked alone into the depths of the valley, speaking indifferently as he walked. "Congratulations, you guessed wrong, Peter and Andreas. They were the last and second to last graduates of that year's Moscow Aviation Institute. They took the risk because I saw a price they could never refuse, $10 for a flight." Hearing this, Cedric couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. He quickly caught up with Karl and said with some reluctance to believe it, "No way. No one would take such a big risk for money." "Of course." Karl patted Cedric's face happily and then said in a mysterious tone, "So, in order to prevent them from changing their minds halfway, I bought the plane. We have already asked someone to remove the parachuting equipment from the cockpit of this plane." Chapter 90 The Soul Harvesting Demon. Cedric looked at Karl with surprise, as if he was meeting him for the first time. Karl didn't intend to explain. He raised his right hand and gently pulled the trigger, firing a red flare into the sky. The bright red light immediately illuminated the entire valley, the surrounding weathered rocks of strange shapes, and the yellow sand that rustled in the wind. Under the illumination of this red light, it looks extremely strange. But what is even more bizarre is that at the moment this flare was launched, countless lights of various colors appeared. Lights appeared in every corner of the valley, and groups of young people followed. They were wearing simple tactical jackets and carrying various old light weapons, and they suddenly appeared as if they had grown out of the ground. Most of them were about the same age as Karl, but the look in their eyes, wrapped in simple headscarves, was so sharp that it was frightening. Cedric looked at these young people nervously, feeling a little uneasy. Whenever he looked into these people's eyes, he always felt like a herbivore seeing a lion. His intuition told him that these young people were not ordinary children. They were more like warriors tempered in the flames of war. Mysterious. "Mr. K, I didn't expect you to actually come. Thank you for your help and for giving us the opportunity to be here on this special night. Let us make our voice heard in this world. An old soldier greeted Karl happily, but he didn't shake his hand. Not because he was impolite. It was just because this veteran had both his hands amputated and only had one leg intact, so he was pushed here in a wheelchair. Cedric looked at the other person in surprise. From this leader, he intuitively experienced for the first time the tenacity of a human soul. Carol just nodded slightly to show respect and spoke directly. Long time no see, Mohammed. I remember when I came here a year ago, you were still a handsome young man. I remember that you had just gotten married, and your wife had just gotten pregnant. I had planned to give your child some gifts when we met this time. As he spoke, Karl used magic to take out a metal car and a pink teddy bear from his ring. The leader named Muhammad looked at the two gifts and just smiled prettily. Then he shook his head and said, no, on the day of my wedding, a missile destroyed everything. After all, I'm a terrorist in their eyes. I was too naive. I was not supposed to have a normal life, just like my fellow countrymen. When he said this, he did not show the sadness and lamentation that one might imagine. He spoke unusually calmly, as if he was telling Carol how many bowls of rice he had eaten today. Cole was silent for a while, then nodded. Please forgive me for not being able to feel sad, but since this is a gift from me, please accept one of them. The child who has not yet felt the beauty of the world. Is he a boy or a girl? Muhammad also fell silent. A moment of recollection made this strong warrior, whose incomplete but steel-like body, tremble slightly for a moment. Then he spoke seriously in a hoarse voice. It was a girl. I named her Amal. Her life was forever frozen at 2 months. Amal means hope in Arabic. Karl murmured, if she grows up, she should be a beautiful girl. Carol said, handing the pink teddy bear in his hand to the young man next to him, who looked at this and the surrounding environment. The teddy bear, which was totally mismatched with the original, was silent for a moment. Then, the moment he took the gift, he raised his head and stared at Karl and spoke seriously. Thank you for your gift, but we don't need these. We need bullets and weapons. Toys are meaningless to us. In Palestine, we can never grow up. The young man's tone was cold and a little ruthless, but Carol was not angry after the other party accepted the gift. He took out a 2-meter long parchment scroll from his ring, spread it on the ground, and then opened his arms and spoke. Okay, that's the end of our friendship story. Now let's talk about our deal. Sign this parchment and you will get the weapons you want, but only after you die. Your souls will be mine. Hearing this, Cedric, who had been hiding behind, was stunned. He hurried to Carol and said angrily, no, you can't do this. What's the difference between your behavior and that of a demon? This is no longer a matter of black magic. If you do that, you will be thrown into Azkaban and will never be able to get out of it for the rest of your life. Facing Cedric's angry questioning, Karl seemed calm. He turned his head and looked through the lenses of his frameless glasses. He stared at the other person silently and spoke with his lips slightly opened. Congratulations on seeing my true self, Mr. Cedric. I'm indeed a demon, and I only act for my own benefit, but compared to those ignorant guys, you should know better what kind of hell this land under our feet is. In heaven, people can do without God, but in hell, everyone prays to the devil. If you make a deal with the devil, you can let them roar in despair, then the soul seems insignificant. Some people will never sell their souls in their entire lives. Like you. You are a good person, and your noble qualities are admirable, but please remember, in this world, some people, from the moment they are born, can only sell their souls. I can provide such a trading platform, and all I will gain is gratitude. Karl's words once again stomped heavily on Cedric's worldview, which had already become a ruin. At the same time, the choices made by those young people further confirmed what Karl had just said. These young people rushed to sign the parchment, and some even fought for a signature spot. Pulling, and even cursing at each other, they roared and tore at their companions. And finally looked at the familiar faces with tears in their eyes. After signing his name on the parchment, he received a set of standard Soviet individual equipment and waved goodbye to his companions with a smile. In less than a moment, a total of 1,000 sets of Soviet individual equipment had been distributed by these people. They were dressed neatly, knelt down in unison, kissed the ground beneath their feet, and then disappeared, as if they had never been there. Under the cover of night, it disappeared into the valley. Karl calmly picked up the parchment on the ground and called back the two pilots who had just vomited. He threw $10 in cash and an American passport copied using magic to the two men and said, "There is still about an hour before the attack begins. You must fly the plane and leave the country immediately. First, go to the airport in Spain to refuel, and then fly directly to the New York International Airport in the United States. Someone will pick you up there, as long as you are not shot down by anti-aircraft missiles. The Western life you envy is waving at you." After giving the two men instructions, Karl grabbed Cedric, who was still confused, and waved goodbye to Mohammed. He used apparition to leave the valley. Mohammed, sitting in a wheelchair, looked up at the starry sky and said earnestly, "Allah bless your messenger. Sing his praises in the name of praise." On the other side, on the Holy Sepulchre outside the city of Jerusalem, Karl and Cedric, one stood still, and the other sat quietly on the ground. Almost an hour passed like this, until Cedric, unable to bear the resentment and confusion in his heart any longer, ran to Karl and wanted to question him. But the other party pressed his lips with a finger of his right hand, signaling him not to speak. He pointed his left hand at the city of Jerusalem at the foot of the mountain and spoke softly, "Don't talk, the flood is coming." Chapter 91, Ode to Courage. As soon as Karl finished speaking, the time finally came to 12 o'clock midnight. In the city of Jerusalem at the foot of the mountain, there were many Christian churches at the same time. Melodious bells rang out, the sounds rose and fell, and the choir's hymns were accompanied by the music of the organ. They began to sing the gospel of the coming of the Holy Spirit, and the originally deserted streets immediately became lively. Countless people who come here to travel and make pilgrimages hug and kiss each other and celebrate the arrival of Christmas. All the beauty of human society seemed to emerge at this moment, until a sharp air raid alarm shattered this beautiful bubble. Flames rose from the other side of the sea, carrying with them mankind's most primitive hatred and anger, and roared loudly at the world. In an instant, the originally quiet and peaceful streets became chaotic, and air raid sirens mixed with various gunshots began to sound one after another. Rockets in the sky, dragging their tails like meteors, streaked across the sky, or more like a warrior in desperate situation, throwing his last spear at the enemy. They either fall to the ground, bringing death to the crowd, or explode in the sky, engraving human courage in the night sky. Cedric stood on the top of the mountain, looking at the city below that was constantly exploding and burning, in silence. It was not until a strong gust of wind brought his gaze back to the sky that he saw a huge iron bat. It flapped its burning wings and flew towards the sea. But it seemed to be very attached to this beautiful land. As it flew away, it deliberately rolled up a cloud of dandelions and parachutes opened in the sky. Preparing to return to the hometown they had never seen. But dandelions are so fragile. Facing the giant net made of steel and gunpowder, their only fate seems to be burning. But every dandelion is not afraid of burning at all, and even if every burning can be exchanged for another dandelion falling to the ground. That was enough for them. Time passed by minute, with huge explosions as the prelude and the symbol of gunfire as the accompaniment. The roar of the frightened crowd and the cry of every burning dandelion are the most beautiful hymns of Christmas today. Carol looked at everything happening in front of him calmly, but did not take off his glasses. He had to admit it. Sometimes, seeing the tragedy of the world through a layer of glass can always bring a sense of escape. Human beings are always like this. As long as they haven't seen it with their own eyes, they can always seem to find reasons to excuse their conscience. Now he also needed such a reason, but the voice in his head made his clenched hands even tighter. At 100 points, add 100 points, add 100 points. The dog system mechanically reported its gains in a loop, but Karl had to admit that this gain did not make him feel very good. The breeze blew through his hair until the first ray of sunlight shone from the other side of the sea onto the mountain peaks. This ode to courage has finally come to an end. Congratulations to the host for harvesting the souls of 1000 innocent people, and the reward points are 10. The current points are 100 million. The system has been upgraded to 2.0, and the scope of collecting points has been expanded to the entire magic world. At the same time, the system has added many interesting functions. Please listen to me, and I will explain it to you slowly. No need. Carol interrupted calmly. You know what I want. Just tell me what price I need to pay. Forget about the lottery or anything like that. I don't like that feeling of uncertainty. These words made the system silent for a long time, and then the mean voice sounded again. Considering that the host did this out of a good conscience, it does not meet the standards of a villain. So please give an explanation. Hearing this, Carol smiled indifferently and retorted disdainfully, as if he had heard a joke. You guessed wrong. I don't have any burden on my conscience. I just think that the two sides that can fight each other should match their strength as soon as possible. It is conducive to the continuation of the conflict, isn't it? And doing so will also help accelerate the world's rapid rush towards the brink of chaos. I know very well that morality and conscience have great power in this world, but in the face of power, all of this is useless. Karl explained calmly, and the dog system was silent for a while, then immediately expressed, your logic impressed me. It is indeed as you said, all this is for your own self-interest. So the judgment has been modified. This behavior meets the criteria of a villain, and the host will only be charged 500 points. After dealing with the dog system in his mind, Karl looked at Cedric, who had been standing there for 6 hours. He walked slowly behind the other person, and instead of comforting him directly, he took out his silver cigarette case. He pulled one out and handed it over. This thing may kill you in the years to come, but I want to be in this world right now. Maybe this is the only thing that can temporarily solve your troubles. Cedric turned his head with difficulty, looked at Carol with red eyes, took the cigarette with trembling right hand, and slowly put it in his mouth. Karl very considerately lit it for him, then lit his own, found a flat stone on the ground, and sat down calmly. Cedric followed suit, and sat quietly opposite Karl, even though he kept coughing because of the cigarette. Still sucking hard, the two sat face to face for quite a while. Until the cigarette burned. Cedric burned his fingers, and this usually gentle boy threw the cigarette, but under his feet, and stomped it out with his feet. He stared at Carol with red eyes and asked loudly, what have we done? Did we cause all this? We gave them weapons. It also gave them a reason to die. But why? Why must it be like this? His questioning was loud, but it revealed an indescribable sadness. He stood on the mountain for 6 hours. I thought about it for 6 hours, but I still couldn't figure out why it had to be this way. He couldn't understand why one party had to attack the other party on such a beautiful holiday. He couldn't understand why someone could be so reckless even though they knew there was a huge gap in strength between them. What he couldn't understand even more was that a century ago, the people on this land could at least live together in peace. But why is it that today, in a world that claims to be progressive, there is hatred and killing everywhere? He had not learned the relevant knowledge and was unable to figure out the problems in his mind, but he did so based on his conscience as a human being. He couldn't remain completely indifferent to what he saw, and he felt very painful inside. He felt like his head was about to explode. On the other side, Cole was unusually calm. He slowly took off his frameless glasses, then he raised his head and stared at Cedric's red eyes and spoke in a flat tone. Do you want to know the answer to this question? I can give you the answer, but please be mentally prepared. Sometimes the truth is often the cruelest. Chapter 92. Forever. Karl's words made Cedric hesitate. In the past years, he thought he was not a coward. But the flame of courage in his heart began to gradually extinguish when it came into contact with the cold reality. There was always a voice in his mind that kept repeating to him not to try to get close to the truth. Your life has nothing to do with them. Go back to Hogwarts, go back to England, and everything will be fine. You are still the most respected and beloved senior among Hufflepuff students, still an excellent student in the eyes of teachers, still the pride of my father. The voice was so strong that he could only bow his head and remain silent. Until a plain voice sounded, you can opt out. What? Cedric looked up suddenly, but found that Karl, who was looking at him, had no change in his expression. He opened his lips slightly and repeated it again. Don't doubt it. Generally speaking, for others who join my organization, their only chance to quit is death. But you are my first real friend in Hogwarts after all. People who are first timers always have some privileges. You can choose to quit, and I won't do anything bad to you. We can still be good friends when we return to school. My world has nothing to do with you. Carol said these words so calmly, but in Cedric's mind, these words were like thunder. It exploded in his mind, and the huge noise kept echoing in his mind. It was like a red hot coal, branding directly into his heart, causing him to feel excruciating pain. But while those coals brought pain, they also provided the most precious fuel for his dying flame of courage. Cedric stood up suddenly, his red eyes filled with tears, and roared loudly, "What right do you have to make such a choice? Do you think you are a god? Can you dominate everything in the world? Why do you become so arrogant and think you can control the fate of others? We can't do anything, right?" Facing Cedric's roar, Karl also slowly stood up. His expression did not change at all, and his tone was terribly cold. "You're right. I'm not a god, and I don't have any ability to change the world, but it's the same. Those who stand at the top and enjoy the cake made by the people at the bottom with their lives, blood, and tears, have no power to change the world. They claim to be the ruling class of this world, the makers of the world system, but in fact they are just another group. People who have been alienated by the system have never been the subject of history. Neither you nor I are the 1,000 warriors who sacrificed their lives to realize their ideals, and their compatriots who are still suffering behind them, and all the ordinary people in this world. They are the main body of history. I have never been so naive as to believe that one person can completely change the world. I'm an absolute egoist. I will only act in my own interest. Then, why did you do this?" Cedric continued to roar, his brain quickly digesting what Karl had just said. "Don't tell me you didn't do this out of any good intentions." Hearing this, Carol's expression finally began to change, and a smile appeared on his face. This handsome young man he smiled, and shook his head, then looked at the still burning city at the foot of the mountain and spoke calmly. "Of course, I do all this because I can't get what I want under the current world order. Since this world cannot provide what I want, then this world is meaningless to me. Letting it go to chaos, or even complete destruction, is what I want to do, and I don't have much patience. Some people say that if you leave the fire, you can wait slowly, but I don't like this. The fire is meaningless to me. I prefer to throw the incendiary bomb directly into the powder magazine." When Cedric heard this, he wanted to refute Karl, but he had not systematically studied this knowledge. He couldn't find any words to refute, so in the end he could only stare at Karl and yell from a personal perspective, "What about life? The lives of those 1,000 people are just bargaining chips in your eyes. Human life should not be used as any kind of bargaining chip. Everyone's life is worthy of respect, and the loss of life can never be restored." By the end of his words, Cedric's throat was hoarse, and this kind-hearted boy was using almost all the strength of his lungs. Then he forced the words in his heart out of his throat. But Carol, who was sitting opposite him, was still terrifyingly calm, and his tone of voice still did not show any emotional fluctuations. "You're right. No one's life should be used as a bargaining chip, but they can be used as a sacrifice. Please understand that the sacrifice I'm talking about is not some kind of fuel for black magic, but something much grander. You know what? In the east of this continent, in that distant country, they call the death of a hero a sacrifice. If you have some knowledge of their writing, you should know that the word sacrifice originally refers to the cattle and sheep slaughtered in sacrifice to heaven and earth. Don't you find it strange to use a word like this to represent the death of a hero?" Karl's question made Cedric, a top student at Hogwarts, freeze in place. Of course he knew what Carol meant, but he hadn't thought deeply about it. So he slowly looked up at Carol and said frankly, "I don't know the answer to that." Hearing this answer, Cole laughed with relief, and his tone finally changed. He spoke with some excitement. "I must also be honest with you. I have never thought about this question before, or I have never deeply understood the answer to this question, but I can give you the answer now. Although there are many unfair things in this world, there is one thing that is always fair. That is, everything follows the principle of equal exchange, whether it is an individual or a country. When Great nations are in trouble. The best men of their people use the heavens and the earth as altars and their lives as sacrificial calves. Pray to this ruthless world, in exchange for the liberation of your nation, in exchange for the prosperity of your country. If one life is not enough, then 10 people will do. If 10 lives are not enough, then 100, 1000, 10,000, or even 1 million or 10 million. The holy city is right under our feet. The God believed in by 3 religions is indeed ruthless. He always collects payment before delivering goods. Having said this, Karl stood on the top of the mountain, opened his arms to let the breeze caress his body, and took 2 deep breaths, because he also needs time to ease the guilt in his heart, but he adjusts quickly. It only took 2 breaths to dispel the remaining guilt in my heart. Then he slowly turned around, looked at Cedric quietly, and asked calmly, I don't expect you to understand what I'm saying right now, but I hope you can answer my first question right now. Is it a choice to quit or not? When asked this question, Cedric stood there silently, then lowered his head and slowly approached Karl, and finally grabbed the guy's tie. He imitated the other person's previous domineering attitude, forced the other person's face close to himself, and spoke with a weird expression and gritted teeth. Don't think about dumping me, you bastard. I will always be behind you, and if you do anything bad, I will definitely be your most staunch opponent. I will verify every word you say in the years to come. You annoying junior. Karl, who was forced face to face by the other party, showed no sign of anger, but just spoke calmly. Of course, my dear senior, or to put it another way, you are welcome to join our organization, Comrade Diggory. After they finished speaking, with a burst of air, the 2 figures disappeared on the Holy Sepulchre mountain. At the same time, in a valley in the north, Muhammad had just finished his prayer, and was listening to the radio in his ear. There are constant reports coming in from the Squid government about this terrorist attack. Muhammad shook his head, and was about to ask someone to turn off the radio, but suddenly some books or something fell down from above his head. Those things were wrapped in exquisite paper, made into a traditional gift style, tied with exquisite bows, and pinned with a card. It reads, "This is your Christmas gift. The true path to salvation lies within it." Looking at the line of text, Muhammad was a little excited. Having lost both hands, he did not seek help from anyone. He bent over and opened the gift with his teeth. Inside was a small book wrapped in red leather. There is a golden sun painted on the package, with a kind old man portrayed in it. And underneath the little book, there was a newspaper, but the time of the newspaper surprised him a little. 2024 5.13. Looking at this string of numbers, Muhammad's heart beat extremely fast. He was so excited that he flipped through the newspapers with his only remaining foot. I want to see whether my country will have escaped from suffering in the future, almost half a century from now. But as the newspapers were turned, this strong soldier would smile and then sigh and cry. After all the newspapers were turned over, Muhammad suddenly saw that there was a card at the bottom with the words written on it. If this is the real future, are you still willing to fight? Looking at the line of text, Muhammad slowly closed his eyes, letting the tears from the corners of his eyes wet his collar. But when he opened his eyes again, he shouted without hesitation, "Forever." Chapter 93. The Old Man and the Gift. Christmas Day, 4 am. Godric's Hollow. Because there is a 2-hour time difference between Palestine and the UK, when Karl set foot on the land of the Scottish Highlands again. The sun had not yet illuminated the beautiful Scottish Highlands, and it was just pitch black all around. The heavy snow fell, completely covering up all traces of the revelry on Christmas Eve. A bitter cold wind blew from the north, and there was neither the warmth of the Sinai Peninsula nor the gentle breeze of the Mediterranean Sea. Sometimes the night is vast white with a few scattered lights around. This place is named after the famous wizard, Godric Gryffindor, and is a village where muggles and wizards live together at the same time. There are many old houses of pure-blood wizards in this area. It is said that the wizard goldsmith Paul Wright created the world's first golden snitch in this place. In the center of the village, there is a small square, and in the center of the square is a war memorial-like building. There are a few shops around, a post office, a bar, and a small church. The church was brightly lit, and the light from the candles shone through the stained glass on the walls, emitting a jewel-like luster. Looking Inside through the glass, you can see some devout families worshipping in the church all night long. Carol was walking on the snow-covered square, holding his shopping bags. The natural carpet under his feet made a crackling sound. It was particularly loud on the streets in the early morning. The heavy snow fell on his golden hair and gradually covered the trail of footprints behind him. He slowly passed through the center of the square, and as he approached, the monument in the center began to change. The obelisk engraved with people's names turned into a statue of 3 people. Karl just raised his head and glanced at it calmly. He didn't stay any longer, although deep in his heart, he envied this pure family affection. But he did not have much fondness for this pure spirit of sacrifice. What he liked was resistance, no matter what the extent. Even if it was a desperate charge, knowing that he would die, he would respond with the highest respect, moving the enemy with his sacrifice and noble qualities alone. In his eyes, this behavior was ridiculous and meaningless, but he still quickened his pace and walked alone on the deserted street. The suffocating feeling of loneliness was really uncomfortable. Besides, he always keeps his word. Even though that old guy is annoying, it's no big deal to spend a day of the festival with him. Can't the living environment be improved? Looking at the dilapidated mansion in front of him, Karl's face twitched wildly. The old house in front of him was really too dilapidated. This dilapidated appearance was the first time Karl had seen one in the British wizarding world, apart from Ollivander's one-shop. So he held the shopping bag tightly in his left hand and covered his nose with his right hand, afraid of inhaling dust, and then kicked the door open. The poor old door couldn't withstand Karl's violent way of opening it. The rusty door bolt was kicked off, and the 2 door panels fell to the ground with a bang. Be gentle, kid. This mansion, like me, can no longer withstand your abuse. Dumbledore's voice came slowly from the depths of the room, and the old man's figure slowly appeared, with an unhappy expression on his face. As soon as he saw me. Looking at the other person's resentful face and the 2 door panels on the ground, Karl had no intention of apologizing, and walked slowly into the room, stepping on the door panels. After observing the surroundings for a while, he said with a smile, "It seems like you are looking forward to this day. The room is well cleaned. I'm very satisfied with it." Hearing this, the expression on Dumbledore's face immediately changed from unhappiness to resentment. The little old man said dimly, "You're late. You promised to spend a full day with me at the festival, and now 4 hours have passed. Isn't it just 4 hours late?" Karl said disdainfully, "Good things always have to wait. Being 4 hours late is nothing. Some things take half a century to wait. As long as there is a good ending in the end, I think it is worth it." Karl's words startled Dumbledore. He slowly turned his head and looked at the window behind him. Outside the window was a frozen lake. If it is summer, the area around the lake will be the most beautiful place in the entire valley, and it is under the big tree next to the lake. He had the best time of his life. Following Dumbledore's gaze, Karl felt a little confused, but he was not in the mood to care about that now. So he gave the order without any hesitation. "What are you looking at? What's so interesting about a frozen lake? Come and get to work." Dumbledore, whose memories were interrupted by the words, stared at Cole with resentful eyes again. Carol also looked at the other person unceremoniously, and at the same time, placed the things in the shopping bag neatly on the table. Those were the ingredients for his Christmas dinner, which he bought in a supermarket in London. There were fresh carrots and celery, onions, prime steaks, and a huge 30-pound turkey. He pointed to something on the table. "Today is Christmas. Of course we have to enjoy a delicious meal, even though it's just you and me. But, as a Hufflepuff, my standards for food will never be lowered, so I'll start working immediately this year. Wash the carrots first and peel them at the same time. Light up the stove in the kitchen. I'm going to start cooking." As he spoke, Carol skillfully put on his chef's uniform and threw a wrapped gift directly to the old man in front of him. He then took the other ingredients and rushed into the kitchen next door. Dumbledore, who was suddenly given a gift, looked at the gift box in his hand with his brain in a state of shutdown. There was silence for a long time, until Karl in the kitchen started to threaten directly. "If you stay where you are, I will throw all your candies into the stove and burn them as kindling. Don't get lost in your memories anymore. Come and work for me." Such Disrespectful words made the arrogant principal very dissatisfied, and he snorted with disdain. But his hands did not stop moving. He carefully opened the gift, revealing a pair of exquisite wool socks. The exquisite weaving technique depicts a spirited young boy and an old man sulking in a corner, and inside the wool socks, there was a photo, and this was the first time Dumbledore saw the photo. I suddenly remembered that it was the photo that Karl forced me to take at the end of the flying broom launch. The sulking old man and the handsome young man standing on the stage looked so strange no matter how you looked at them. But looking at the photo, the smile on the old man's face was like the rising sun melting the snowflakes. Get rid of all previous dissatisfaction completely. It was not until the sound of candy being unwrapped came from the kitchen that Dumbledore quickly stood up, shouting, "Don't move, that's a limited edition, I'll be right there." He walked quickly towards his kitchen with a brisk pace that was not expected for his age. Chapter 94 Exploding Christmas Meals and MCDONALD and -039 S. 6 AM, McDonald's, Glasgow, Scotland. Karl sat on a chair in the fast food restaurant and used force to pick out a small piece of coal slag that was embedded in his teeth. The saliva mixed with the spit was placed on the napkin beside me, and I looked at the napkin that had turned completely black. He turned with a dark face to look at Dumbledore, who was standing opposite him with his head lowered like a child who had made a mistake, and asked with a twitching cheek, "Dear Principal, don't you have anything to explain?" He was very angry now. Less than half an hour ago, he was still in the dilapidated old house, working hard to prepare his Christmas dinner, trying to stop the other party from putting a full half-pound of white sugar into the roast turkey's stomach. Force the other party to hand over the olive oil and secretly replace it with honey. And after a series of things happened, he tried to stop the other party from trying to use white sugar instead of salt and add it to the grilled steak. Karl got so angry that he drove the sugar-loving old bee out of the kitchen and ordered him to light the fireplace in the living room. The result of this bad decision has resulted in the two of them now sitting in a fast food restaurant with dirty faces. I don't know if the old man is really old or if the house has been uninhabited for a long time. Mixed in with the firewood placed next to the fireplace was an extremely dangerous branch of a tree with explosion holes. The sulking old man didn't notice the dangerous object at all and directly threw the wood, which was equivalent to half a kilogram of TNT. He threw it into the burning fireplace, and with a loud explosion, he saw the golden turkey he had roasted. Driven by the blast, it spread its wings and flew toward the free moon. Karl worked hard for almost 2 hours to prepare the Christmas dinner, and just like that, he followed the wood on the roof of the old house. Everything was given to God in advance. The impact of the explosion blew Karl's silky golden hair into a golden lion's hair. The fire also burned Dumbledore's iconic white beard clean off. Although the two quickly used magic to restore the bombed Dumbledore's old house, they looked at the food that fell all over the floor as well as a turkey wing at Karl's feet. The old man and the young man who crawled out of the explosion ruins also clearly recognized it. Making Christmas dinner by yourself has become an impossible luxury. The two stood in the snow for almost 10 minutes until Karl, who had not eaten all night and whose stomach was rumbling with hunger, unable to bear the hunger any longer, he dragged Dumbledore to the largest city in Scotland and found a McDonald's to have breakfast. As for why they didn't go to Diagon Alley, the reason was simple. Everyone was busy celebrating the festival, and no wizard could imagine at on Christmas Day, explosions will occur in someone's kitchen. As for other British restaurants, Karl can only say that dogs don't go there. After all, whenever there are young British mothers, I took my child to a pediatric hospital in the UK for a checkup and asked the doctor why my child was unwilling to eat. The doctor always asks the patient to take the child to KFC and McDonald's. KFC grandpa and McDonald's uncle can always miraculously cure anorexia in British children. Dumbledore, who was sitting opposite Karl, looked at Karl's face, which was not even washed and was covered with black oil stains. He could only keep his head down and remain silent. After all, in his past years of life, ever since his sister died, he never imagined that someone would spend the holidays with him, nor did he ever think about cooking at home. So much so that he took away the gift from Professor Strani, the dangerous but precious branch of the explosion hole tree. They were just randomly piled up in the firewood pile nearby. This led to the tragedy, but Dumbledore's cowardly behavior made Karl very unhappy. He stared at the old man in front of him and spoke in a flat tone. You really don't have anything to say, not even an apology or anything like that, and about you damaging my house, and then there's the matter of my precious potion raw materials. What about the compensation package? Are you planning on denying it? What, your house? Dumbledore looked up angrily, his eyes full of anger. This little bastard had no respect or consideration for the elderly at all. I just blew it up. Is there any need to make such a fuss? Besides, isn't that my house? I have a trivial relationship with this little bastard. Seeing that the other party refused to admit his mistake and his attitude was so tough, Carol did not tolerate any bad behavior and analyzed it very sensibly. I'm not wrong. I was able to attend Hogwarts because of your guarantee and the guardianship consent form you signed. According to the civil code of the British wizarding world, you become my guardian the moment the agreement is signed. At the same time, there will be an adoption relationship between you and me. According to the provisions of property law, after your death, all your property will be inherited by me. Of course, that's if you don't have any other offspring. But at your age, it's probably impossible to have any more offspring. After all, you don't even have a partner. Karl's words deeply hurt Dumbledore's heart, and the old man looked at him in surprise. Countless unpleasant words flashed through my mind, but due to my upbringing and status, I could never say them. I helped him so much, but this guy doesn't respect me at school and even occupies my office. I'm alive and well now, and I have started planning for the inheritance of my property after my death. Who does this bastard spirit come from? The more I look at him, the more I hate him. At the same time, the old man was a little unconvinced and muttered in a low voice, who said I don't have a partner? I have someone I love. What is that? Karl looked at Dumbledore in confusion. Did I hear it wrongly? The great Dumbledore, is there someone he loved? Hearing this, Dumbledore immediately realized that he seemed to have said something wrong, and quickly laughed it off, and changed the subject. I wanted to ask you, is there anything delicious here? This restaurant must have been carefully selected by you. The atmosphere is pretty good. Seeing that the other party had changed the subject, Carol, who had already guessed the answer in his heart, did not want to let the other party go, and deliberately asked, don't change the subject. Although I'm not interested in other people's past, I'm interested in your past, my dear principal. I'm still very interested. Let's talk about the person you loved, or you can exchange it for another secret. Say, you know the secret about my life experience. After asking, he silently looked at Dumbledore, who had a complicated expression. I have already started thinking about how to gain more benefits from this old guy. So he deliberately added a sentence. Oh, by the way, this isn't a restaurant, and I didn't carefully select it. It's just a chain store. Those who make mistakes and refuse to admit them do not deserve the kindness of others. With such hurtful words and the fatal question before Dumbledore could no longer pretend. He waved his hand quickly and said, alright, I surrender and I apologize to you, kid. What do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do. I can help you. Looking at an old man with a dusty face and an afro begging for mercy, Karl always felt a little uneasy in his conscience. Just when he was thinking about cheating the other party less, that damn voice rang out again. Congratulations to the host for successfully controlling his principal. Immediately issue a special mission. Within 24 hours, do your best to go against the other party's wishes. Try hard to train the opponent into what you want. Special reward, upgraded version of the apparition spell. Chapter 95 Adoption Agreement and Additional Payment. When Karl first heard about this reward, his heart was not shaken so quickly. After all, although his sense of morality is very thin, it is not completely non-existent. A small upgrade spell is enough to control his behavior. This dog system underestimates itself a bit, so Karl said disdainfully in his mind, what are you talking about? Don't you know that the old man in front of me is my principal and guardian? Upgraded version of apparition. can use magic markers, just like anything and everything can be transformed in space in an instant. And it is completely unaffected by anti-apparition. Does the host have anything else to say? So I have no intention of letting him go. Karl took over the conversation smoothly without weakening his tone at all point, but the look in his eyes when he looked at Dumbledore changed a little. He squinted his eyes and smiled, and his right index finger kept tapping on the table. Dumbledore suddenly felt that something was wrong. Every time he acted like a fool and made such expressions and movements, he was about to get into trouble. Just at this moment, the waiter brought the set meal they ordered, and Dumbledore quickly changed the subject. Let's eat first and then talk about other things, okay? As he said that, he stretched out his hand to take out a burger he had never seen before, but before he could open the package, Karl interrupted him and took out a piece of parchment from his ring with a smile. While exchanging it with the other person's burger, he stared at the old man in front of him and said, "Don't worry, let's get down to business first, considering you damaged my future house, and the Christmas dinner I had prepared so carefully was completely ruined, which seriously hurt my feelings, so I hope you can make compensation. I don't need your financial compensation, I just need your promise." Karl's words made Dumbledore suddenly alert. None of the documents he had signed with this little bastard were without loopholes, but just as he was about to refuse, Carol motioned for him to look at the document again, and spoke in a bewitching tone. "Don't worry, the content of the document is very simple, even you can understand it, and I know what others have paid for me. I will definitely give back to the other party, so as long as you sign, I will pay for all your consumption today, and we can spend a happy holiday together." These words made Dumbledore hesitate. He slowly lowered his head to look at the parchment in his hand and just glanced over it briefly. He immediately looked up in surprise and frowned at Karl. You sure? Why do you suddenly have such an idea?" Karl seemed very natural. He picked up the Coke beside him, took a sip, and then immediately put it aside. Damn, that's so sweet. Then he took a deep breath and said seriously, "There's no need to have too many thoughts. It's not that I don't have regrets in my life, although I don't really appreciate the existence of family affection, but as a normal person, I envy this kind of emotion. Even though you are already very old, it may not stay with me for too long, but I guess there's no harm in experiencing it once in a while." Karl's tone was very relaxed, but Dumbledore's heart was filled with waves because of the document in front of him. It comes from the British Ministry of Magic and its content is very simple. It is a standard adoption agreement in the wizarding world. The two parties to the agreement were naturally him and the little bastard in front of him. He only had to sign the document and a vague adoption relationship would be established between the two of them. It was officially confirmed. Looking at such a simple legal document, this old man who had lived through a century, but he was a little hesitant after a long time. After his sister left him, family affection became a strange word to him. Even though he knew that the little bastard in front of him was inextricably linked to him. But when this emotion really needs to be confirmed in the form of a document, the greatest white wizard in the magic world. But I also felt a little scared. It was like a lonely person encountering a stray dog following him. He could feed it, but it was generally better not to give it a name. People were strange like that. Emotions cannot be restrained at all by a piece of paper, but once the family titles are officially confirmed, then losing becomes a very terrible thing. Dumbledore hesitated for a long time, and while he was thinking, Karl, who was sitting opposite him, acted as if nothing had happened. He began to enjoy his breakfast. He ate a chicken wing first, but after only taking a bite, he threw it aside, like he did with the Coke before. Then he opened a double burger and immediately devoured it, with red ketchup and yellow mayonnaise. It was stuck on his face, along with the black dust that had not yet been washed off. The confident young man who was full of vigor and energy and thought he was the best was now just cute. Dumbledore looked at Karl, who was concentrating on his meal, and couldn't help but smile at himself. He quickly used magic to sign his name on the parchment. He threw it directly to Karl, then deliberately put on a stern face and pointed at the chicken wing that the other party had only taken a bite of. "Don't waste food, kid. It's wrong for you to do this." Karl seemed to have expected this to happen. He curled his lips in disdain and put away the signed parchment point while handing a piece of spicy chicken wing to the old man in front of him. It doesn't have sugar in it, so it may not suit your taste, but once you take a bite you'll know why I can't eat it. Hearing this, Dumbledore looked at the chicken wings in front of him, which were covered with red spicy powder, and hesitated. But then he thought of the change in his identity point. In order to educate his child well, he deliberately put on airs and took the chicken wings from the other person. He was prepared to teach the other person the importance of cherishing food through his own actions. But after taking just one bite, the old man suddenly felt something foreign in his mouth. After digging in his mouth for a long time, he finally took out a translucent feather. Looking at the feather in his hand, Dumbledore was stunned for a long time, and Karl began to mock. British food is just like a certain old man, so out of tune, so industrialized. It's really rare to be able to do this level of work. Karl's ridicule made Dumbledore feel a little embarrassed at first, but then he immediately felt relieved. He no longer bothered about the prank played by the little bastard in front of him. I started to imitate the other person and ate heartily without caring about my image. Apart from the unpleasantness just now, overall it was delicious. These strange muggle foods are actually very delicious, but you will look a little disheveled after eating them. All kinds of strange sauces stuck to his stubble that was burned by the explosion, making him look very funny. But Karl didn't care about these. After eating, he swiped his card to pay the bill and gave the other party £100 as a Christmas tip. Then he pulled Dumbledore, pointed to the city's busy commercial street, and spoke seriously. Okay, let's just forget about the breakfast issue. I want to take you to enjoy the holiday. All you have to do is be happy. These words touched Dumbledore a little. He looked at the prosperous street in front of him, and Karl, who was standing beside him, holding his hand. I feel a little warm inside. The child is quite sensible. I did have some prejudices before. What he didn't know was that the moment Cole walked out of McDonald's he immediately said it loudly in his mind. Now, this old ding has officially become my relative, so you know what to do. What does host mean? My meaning is very simple. This old man is now my beloved relative and my only relative in the world in the legal sense, so you have to pay more. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Killing Mad Principle. As a reasonable system, it certainly cannot refuse such a reasonable request. After all, villains are principled, unlike the protagonists who talk nonsense all the time. So the system asked directly. Reasonable request. What you need. Carol didn't act pretentiously and spoke directly. The request is simple. I need a potion formula that can be used to completely control a person, regardless of life or death, even if it's just once. The dog system agreed to such an evil request without hesitation, but added one more task. You must make this relative of yours completely devastated, otherwise the reward cannot be issued. Makes sense. Cole was also very happy after the deal was finalized. He took Dumbledore for a pleasant stroll on the commercial streets of Glasgow. Along the way he dragged the old kid in and out of various candy and cake shops. What about Italian tiramisu? Buy it! Exclamation mark. French souffle, buy it! Exclamation mark. German Black Forest cake, buy it! Cole was more like a grandfather who doted on his grandson and met all of Dumbledore's requests. He even used his financial power to ask those arrogant French pastry chefs to add 3 more portions of sugar to their creation. Soon, the two of them were holding various dessert packages of different sizes. Carl seemed very well behaved along the way. Whenever someone asked about the relationship between him and Dumbledore, Carl always said obediently, "This is my grandfather, my only relative, and he didn't experience the prosperity of the city, so now I make money. I want to repay him well, even though he is a stubborn old man who doesn't listen to criticism." These answers, coupled with his god-level acting skills, always draw cheers from the crowd. At the same time, he looked at Dumbledore with reproach. After all, this old child couldn't walk. When he saw the new desserts, he has a bad temper and is very straightforward. He will throw a tantrum if you don't buy something for him. So in the eyes of the people who don't know the truth, Dumbledore became a stubborn and willful grandfather and his well-behaved and sensible grandson. But Dumbledore had no intention of refutation. It was not easy for him to get some benefits from this little bastard. The fact that I didn't increase my efforts was already a sign of my kindness. When I thought about what I had experienced at Hogwarts besides venting his anger on the dessert in front of him, the old kid continued to buy more exquisite and expensive desserts. He swore that he would make this little bastard bleed properly. But just when Dumbledore was enjoying the warm experience that Karl brought him, as well as the infinite satisfaction of his shopping desire, Karl's eyes were fixed on the colorful shop at the end of the street. The two of them walked slowly like this, buying and eating along the way, until they stood in front of the store. This is a photo of a shop with a very strong Shamet style, exaggerated colorful decorations, and busy people inside. All of this indicates that this is an ostentatious barber shop. Standing at the door of the store, Dumbledore suddenly felt that something was wrong and swallowed the last bite of Boston pie. He coughed lightly and said with a smile, "There doesn't seem to be any good desserts here. Let's go." As he was about to run, Carol, who was carrying a lot of bags, grabbed his sleeve. Dumbledore turned his head with difficulty and saw Karl squinting his eyes and staring at him with a smile. "Don't worry, grandfather. You promised me that we should take care of ourselves." As he spoke, Karl forcefully dragged Dumbledore into the store. The old man clung to the door frame and kept shaking his head. "No, I can restore my image. Thank you for your kindness." Clang. As a result, just as he finished speaking, there was a sound of something heavy falling to the ground, and all the dessert bags in Carol's hands fell directly to the ground. He lowered his head, his shoulders shrugged, and a dull voice came slowly out of the boy's mouth. "I know there is no blood relationship between you and me, but today, I really hope that this family relationship will not be accepted. It seems that there are some things that cannot be bought with money. If you insist on refusing, I won't force you." Looking at the broken biscuits and desserts on the ground, Dumbledore felt extremely heartbroken. Feeling the blaming gazes from the people around him, Dumbledore felt extremely desperate. He was always grateful for what he had received, and suddenly he remembered a saying: "Free things are always the most expensive, and all benefits are secretly marked with a price." With no way to retreat, he could only slowly walk to Carol's side, suppressing the anger in his heart of being deceived again, and spoke as kindly as possible. "Don't say that, kid. We will always be family. I won't reject your kindness, ever." Carol raised his head calmly, without any trace of crying on his face, but instead a smiling face that showed that his evil plan had succeeded. He looked at Dumbledore, who was ready to die heroically, and whispered in a gentle tone, "Don't be so depressed, Principal. You get what you want. I have good news for you. It will be every Christmas from now on. We can all spend time together, right, my dear grandfather?" After hearing this, Dumbledore's remaining hope was completely gone. He could only let Karl drag him to find a barber with a sunny rainbow little white horse on his head. Don't listen to what the other person is saying. Just lie down on the chair obediently and let the other person do what he wants. Then he closed his eyes as if he was dying a heroic death. As time passed and Dumbledore had just finished enjoying 2 honey cakes, he heard the barber's exclamation, "Wow, sir, this hairstyle your grandson chose for you really suits you. A true gentleman. At any age, people should dress up. I think your grandson's decision is absolutely correct." Only after the barber finished speaking, did Dumbledore slowly open his eyes, revealing his beard, which had been burned by the explosion. It had disappeared without a trace at this moment. The barber had great skills and had trimmed his sideburns and some remaining stubble. After cleaning everything up, you also gave his eyebrows, which you usually don't take care of, a simple trim. The long snow white curly hair was completely tamed by the potion, and the smooth long hair was tied into a low ponytail commonly used by gentlemen. Combined with Dumbledore's facial features that have always been covered by a big beard, He is definitely a handsome old man. Point of course, it would be better if there was less color on the top of his head. Point looking at his colorful hair, Dumbledore's heart had completely fallen to the bottom. Point Karl, who had cleaned up nearby, walked over slowly, looked Dumbledore up and down, and said very happily, "Very handsome, Grandpa. You looked 50 years younger in an instant. I now believe that you really did have someone who loved you." While Cole was speaking, the voice of the dog system sounded on time in his mind. "A perfect masterpiece. You successfully killed an old man's most important self-esteem and achieved success. Psychologically collapsed principle. All rewards have been issued. Please check them carefully." Just as Karl expected, this kind old man had a mental breakdown. Point there was no effect from tampering with his candy or constantly talking back at him. Point you have to be ruthless. What do the elderly of this age group care about most, besides eating, is their face. Point Karl got excited just thinking about the Hogwarts headmaster with that weird hair color, but the current Dumbledore was not perfect yet, especially the exquisite, but somewhat inappropriate robe he was wearing. Point, so he pulled up Dumbledore, who was completely confused. "Come on, let's go change into some decent clothes." Chapter 97 Suits and Tuxedos. "Very good, dear grandfather. It's time for you to change your dress. The style of this suit is very good, and I like the obvious hip lifting effect of this suit the most." Carol sits on a leather sofa in the VIP lounge at the Huntsman store in London. Point looking at Dumbledore, who was wearing a brown shirt, trousers and a black vest. He gave his own evaluation with a smile on his face. Point this suit shop was founded in 1849 and is a very famous custom suit shop in London. It once provided services to the British royal family. Point normally, most of these luxury stores adopt a membership system. When the clerk saw an old man with a little white horse with sunshine and rainbow on his head. Point when they and an elegant blonde boy walked in, I thought they were a death rock band from some tavern. Point he was very contemptuous and refused to serve two people. Of course, this was his attitude. Point after Karl made a phone call and gave a tip of £10,000, it simply became, "Sir, please come in." The store manager walked up to Carol attentively, opened the solid wooden box in his hand, and said with a smile on his face, "I didn't expect you to be the Duke of Camino's partner, Mr. Hohenzollern. Please accept our sincere apology. We are working as quickly as possible to make suits for you and your grandfather, but we still need your patience for a while. In the meantime, please enjoy a cigar. If you need any drinks, I'll have them delivered right away." Don't hit a smiling person. Seeing that this guy was so sensible, Karl didn't make things difficult for him. He picked up a cigar at random and said with a smile, "A glass of sherry, thank you. There's no need to be so formal. I still like your previous serious and elegant look." Recover. Hearing this, the store manager's bent back instantly straightened up, and he elegantly placed the cigar box on the small table next to Karl. Point he adjusted his exquisite Windsor tie, held his head high, and turned away. Point looking at the other person's back, Karl smiled slightly and knocked the Cuba cigar in his hand against his boots to make the tobacco inside more compact. Point then he picked up the cigar cutter and prepared to cut the back of the cigar. But before he could do anything, Dumbledore's voice of reproach was rang out. "You can't be a kid like this. There's a no smoking sign on the wall. You can't be unruly like this." Hearing this, Karl raised his head slightly and smiled at Dumbledore, who had just acted as a dressing Barbie doll. Point there was no sign of stopping his hands as he neatly cut the back of the cigar without using any matches. Use magic directly to light the cigar. Then, while savoring the aroma of pine and nuts from the cigar, he spoke softly through the white smoke. "Please, don't be so rigid, my dear principal. There are nearly 1,000 million people living in London, but only a small number of them can walk into this store and spend money, but only less than 1% of them do. Once they step into the door of this store, most of the rules of this city will no longer apply to them." As he spoke, Karl took a deep puff of the cigar in his hand, then raised his head and exhaled the smoke, watching the white smoke rings slowly drifting towards the roof. "So, please stop saying that. Just sit back and enjoy your service." Dumbledore's expression suddenly turned ugly. He didn't like Karl's answer, but he also knew that he couldn't refute him. Point, so he slowly sat next to Carol and asked softly, "What about you, kid? Do you want to be that kind of person too? Of course not. Karl said calmly, continuing to look up and enjoy his cigar. I have no interest in so-called privileges. Deep down, I prefer equal transactions. Enjoying privileges is a very dangerous behavior. Every time you use your privileges, you actually incur a debt for your future. When the debt accumulates to a certain extent, it will always deduct the principal plus interest from you in ways you never expected. Hasn't human history proved this? Those nobles and princes who enjoyed privileges not only lost their crowns in the end, and he lost his own head. This is the price of privilege. After saying that, Karl slowly lowered his head and put out the cigar, which was less than a quarter of the way through, in the ashtray beside him. Only the first half of this cigar tastes good. I don't like the second half, which always has a decadent smell. And your dear principal, don't be like the second half of this cigar. Be happy. Didn't I give you another wonderful Christmas present? Seeing Karl change the subject, Dumbledore's expression suddenly became strange. He hesitated for a long time and said in a sulky tone, "Then, I really have to thank you, Mr. Hohenzollern. I understand that you gave me a suit, but if you give me that specially made lady's evening dress, wouldn't it be a bit too abrupt?" Hearing this, Karl immediately spread his hands and said helplessly, "You can't blame me for this, Principal. I said I like equal transactions. You signed the adoption agreement and paid the price I wanted, then I must pay you what I think is an equal return, whether it is this colorful hairstyle or enough clothes to suit all occasions. This is all necessary. You told me that you had someone you loved, but you didn't say whether he was a man or a woman. In this case, I have to be prepared for both scenarios. I will only make my customers satisfied forever." Such shameless and high-sounding words made Dumbledore really angry, and he had no place to vent his anger. He could only deliberately move to the other side of the sofa. He deliberately distanced himself from Karl to express his dissatisfaction, but of course this dissatisfaction did not last long. When the account manager pushed a small food cart and placed 5 layers of afternoon tea desserts in front of Dumbledore, he spoke attentively. "This is afternoon tea prepared specially for you by Mr. Hohenzollern. According to his instructions, all desserts have double sugar." These words surprised Dumbledore. He slowly picked up a piece of dessert and was about to taste it when he found a note under the cake. It reads, "Thank you for being willing to accompany me in my willfulness, my dear family." Looking at the text, the old man couldn't help but feel a little moved. He turned around and wanted to ease the relationship with Karl, but he found that the little bastard had walked to the center of the store without him knowing and was with the owner of the women's clothing store who came to deliver an evening dress. They looked at the custom-made evening gowns together and then said with disdain, "The design is too conservative. The evening gown covers too much area. There has to be more exposure. Who are you looking down on?" "I'm going to give it to that person, but she's an extremely beautiful woman, so of course I want to fully display the beauty to the world." After saying this, Karl deliberately turned his head and looked at Dumbledore, who was holding a cake in his hand with his mouth wide open, as if he wanted to say something, but stopped. I deliberately waved my hands, signaling the other person not to speak, and at the same time, gave the other person a look that said "I understand." On the other side, Dumbledore's emotions suddenly fluctuated drastically, and he gave up the idea of easing up before. He was completely forgotten about it, and at the same time, in his mind, he strangled all the feelings he had for this guy and flushed them down the toilet. Cole was not panicked at all. In fact, he could figure it out even with his toes. Dumbledore was willing to accompany him in doing all this because he would not refuse himself. Otherwise, who would have the ability to force the greatest white wizard of this century to do something he didn't want to do? After all, this old guy is not only a lonely old man who longs for family affection, but also a completely good person. The good guy will be pointed at gunpoint. Now that it has come to this, he might as well earn some more points for himself. Chapter 98 Gifts and Tulips. Godric's Hollow, England. It was 11 o'clock in the morning when Karl rubbed his sleepy eyes and climbed out of bed, looking at the tidy and clean room in front of him. Sitting at the head of the bed and shaking his head. He really felt tired since he came into this world. This was the first time he felt exhausted from the inside out. He had spent the whole day yesterday taking care of Dumbledore, the old kid. Traveling back and forth between major cities in the UK, shopping and spending non-stop. This old kid has been here since he came out of the suit shop. He just throws tantrums in all kinds of ways. He makes a fuss if you don't give him candy, and he makes a fuss if you don't buy him the things he likes. The key is that there are some things Karl really couldn't understand why he liked it. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but turn his head and look out the window. I only saw a specially customized pink Harley Street 750 parked at the door, and my eyes started twitching. He really didn't expect that this old child who loved candy had such a wild heart. Once he began to imagine in his mind Dumbledore with a sunny rainbow little white pony on his head, wearing a tight black tailored suit. The sight of her riding a pink Harley with leather gloves on made him shudder. The image was too beautiful for him to even think about. Just as he came back to reality from the horrifying scene, there was a knock on the door. Dumbledore opened the door and walked in, holding a bowl of steaming honey tea in his hand. He placed the honey tea on the bedside table and said with a smile on his face, "You are finally up, Mr. Hohenzollern. It seems you were very tired last night." "That's natural. If someone hadn't been acting so petty all the time, I would probably feel a lot more relaxed. Sometimes I really don't know who adopted whom between the two of us." After pushing aside the bowl of honey tea that looked like it could be drawn into strings, Karl complained without hesitation. Dumbledore seemed very confident and even a little happy, although being with this little guy brought him a long lost feeling of family affection. But this little bastard is so annoying. When I got up early this morning to wash up, looking at himself in the mirror, who looked like he was wearing a head of colorful seaweed, Dumbledore felt that he was a little too soft-hearted in torturing this guy yesterday. Anyway, I no longer have the ability to stop this guy from doing what I don't want him to do. It would be better to give the other person a good beating and find some comfort for your own wounded heart. So Dumbledore, who completed the moral loop for the first time, did not preach to Cole as he did in the past. Without any explanation or apology, he just stood up and prepared to leave and said arrogantly when he turned around before leaving, "Oh, by the way, the owls have delivered the gifts to the living room. It seems that you are still very popular, so please get up quickly. After you open the presents, I'm hungry. Go and help me prepare lunch." Such shameless and arrogant words made Karl stunned for a moment. He looked at the other person's back and sighed. What a sin. How could I have gotten into trouble with this guy? But after complaining, he didn't dwell on this issue anymore. After a simple wash, he walked into the living room and started dealing with the packages. Most of the presents were given by classmates, except for almost all the Hufflepuffs, such as Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Everyone brought gifts, including Cedric's of course, but what surprised him most was a black package. It said Severus Snape. Karl thought that he should be the first person to receive a gift from the old bat, and his hands moved quickly. He roughly tore open the gift wrapping paper and opened the wooden box in front of him, only to find a small jar of medicine inside. He picked up the bottle of medicine and held it in front of his eyes to examine it. Before he had looked at it for long, Dumbledore immediately spoke in surprise. "The Felicity Potion. It's surprising that Severus gave you this." After sighing, Dumbledore seemed to remember something and said with a pout, "Humph, this guy's really heartless. I have known him for so many years, and he has never thought of giving me a gift." Listening to the old man's complaints, the anger that Karl had been holding since he got up instantly disappeared. It seemed that Professor Snape was still a good comrade. Don't try to trick him too much from now on. As for fighting Voldemort alone, just do it yourself. After opening Professor Snape's gift, Karl began to open the gifts from others. Most of the gifts given by Hufflepuff classmates are very practical, and the girls usually give desserts that they baked themselves. The boys were busy sending some strange snacks, and of course some boys sent pink heart-shaped cookies. Moreover, Karl could smell the aphrodisiac in the biscuits even through the wrapping paper. He threw all these malicious gifts directly into the fireplace and burned them. While taking a few deep breaths, he suppressed the thought of poisoning the Hufflepuff students' food deep in his heart. The gifts that followed were nothing new. The gift Hermione sent was more like a collection of her questions than a gift. A large notebook was filled with notes from her time reading the history books recommended by Karl. She even used red and blue to mark the importance of various issues based on her own insights and doubts. Seeing this, Carol's eyes twitched wildly, and he resisted the urge to use the notebook as a footrest for the table. After putting it away, I will prepare to pick a time to answer it. Ron's gift was what Cole was most interested in. After he unwrapped the paper, he found a small transparent glass jar with some brown hair inside. Carl knew that this was Peter Pettigrew's hair, which would play a crucial role in his next actions. He was very satisfied with this, just like Ron was satisfied when he received his gift. After all, the gift he gave was so simple and unpretentious. There were exactly 100 golden galleons. After all the gifts were opened, only Harry and Cedric were left. After struggling for a long time, Karl decided to put Cedric's gift last. So he directly opened Harry's gift package. After opening it, Karl's eyes twitched for the nth time. There was a set of women's cosmetics and a thick little notebook inside, which recorded some of Harry's makeup tips. Looking at those cosmetics, there are also many pages of makeup tips. Cole was certain that in the near future, his sex-changing magic might really come in handy. He shook his head vigorously to dispel the imagined images in his mind. Then he carefully unwrapped Cedric's gift. The moment it was opened, a refreshing fragrance wafted out of the box, and a bunch of beautiful blue flowers appeared in the center of the box. Tulips. Looking at the flowers in the box, Cole was a little confused. He carefully took the bouquet of tulips out of the box. Then I found a note inside, which said, "Time was in a hurry, and I didn't have the chance to prepare a better gift for you, but I remember your first day of school. I told you that you like blue, so I grew some blue tulips. I hope you like them." Looking at the text and the tulips in his arms, Karl felt extremely embarrassed. Damn, can't this guy think flexibly? Even if you give yourself a bottle of wine, don't you feel ambiguous when giving such a gift? Just as Cole was madly complaining about Cedric in his mind, there was a fierce knocking sound outside the window. He slowly turned his head and found an owl carrying a small package standing outside the window. Karl opened the window, took the package from the owl's claws, and glanced at the shipping address. I couldn't help but laugh. It seems that the so-called glory is not that important in the face of huge interests. Chapter 99. The Protector of the Dark Forces in the British Wizarding World in the Malfoy Family. Seeing Karl so happy, Dumbledore couldn't help but feel curious. He came over to see what the gift was. It turned out to be just an ordinary invitation letter, and the sender of the invitation was also familiar to him. Mr. Lucius Malfoy. Seeing this, the old man couldn't help but say sourly, "It's just an invitation to a banquet. I didn't expect that our famous Mr. Hohenzollern would be so happy about it. It seems that sometimes giving gifts is also a science." Hearing such sour words from the old kid, Carol was not angry. He put away the invitation and shrugged his shoulders. "You're wrong. You probably think that I just received an expensive invitation, so I'm like those vulgar people. I feel honored and happy to be able to attend a gathering of so-called pure-blood nobles, but the message I get from this invitation is exactly the opposite. This is more like a letter of surrender, which shows that Mr. Lucius has figured it out. In the face of huge interests, the identity of a noble is not enough. It is wise to join my plan." Plan? Dumbledore was a little confused and instantly alert. He looked at Cowl's face and asked carefully, "What plan? What is the purpose of the plan? You promised me that you would not cause trouble in Hogwarts." Of course. Faced with the doubts, Cole was very calm and didn't even intend to hide it. He took out his wand and cleared the torn gift wrapping paper from the floor. He slowly put on his chef's uniform and prepared to cook lunch for 2 people. Speaking slowly as he got dressed, "I always keep my word. Within this year, I will never cause any trouble in Hogwarts again. So this is the goal of my plan. I changed it to the entire British Wizarding World. I want to drain the wealth of the entire British Wizarding World, and at the same time, give it to this lifeless world. It brought a little bit of shock from the financial crisis, and at the same time, it took advantage of this crisis to reorganize the organizational structure of the British Ministry of Magic and pave the way for what's next. After saying this, Karl ignored Dumbledore, who was too shocked to speak, and looked at the table full of ingredients. I started thinking about what to eat for lunch today. Forget roast turkey, because it's not tasty and is difficult to make. He was tired of eating fish and chips, so he decided to make a German roast pork knuckle with some sauerkraut for lunch today. For dessert, I made a black forest cake using 100% dark chocolate, and at the same time, gave this old sweet lover a lesson on healthy eating. After making up his mind, he prepared to walk towards the kitchen. But he didn't expect that, as soon as he took a step, Dumbledore behind him quickly grabbed his right hand. Asked urgently, you serious about what you just said? I won't allow you to do this. I'm your guardian and adopter now. You must obey me, kid. Your idea is very dangerous, and it will have very serious consequences. Facing Dumbledore's preaching, Karl seemed very well behaved. He turned his head to look at Dumbledore, who had an anxious face, patted his hand, and spoke in a comforting tone. Of course, without the identity of the adopted son of the greatest white wizard of this century, how could I smoothly carry out my plan? I am just an unknown kid. I don't have that much prestige and credibility, nor do I have that deep background. Don't worry, as my backer and protector, you will get the benefits you deserve. As for the education between us, it's like family. I'm sorry, dear principal, I'm a disobedient child. After saying that, Karl freed his right hand and looked at Dumbledore, who was almost losing color after realizing that he had been tricked again. He gave a warm smile and went straight into the kitchen. Dumbledore stood there in a daze for who knows how long, until the aroma of roasted pork knuckle and sauerkraut came from the kitchen. He waved his hands, cast a soundproofing spell around himself, and then shouted, while holding his breath, "Gale, it's all your fault, old bastard." The second day of Christmas, 9 AM, Malfoy Manor. A heavy snowfall at night covered this French Baroque-style manor with a layer of silver coat. Thick snow covered every corner of the estate, including the once neat and green Bermuda lawn. The accumulated snow covers the dome and grass with a thick blanket. The entire manor was filled with a winter atmosphere, except for the path in the center of the manor, which had been cleaned up long ago. Lucius, with his wife and children, stood at the door early to greet them. The house elves had already lit up every candle in the manor, and the golden light shone through the glass onto the silver hair of the man. It makes this already majestic gentleman even more noble. The three people had obviously been waiting at the door for a long time, so much so that Draco became a little impatient. "Mind your manners, Draco." Lucius looked at his son, who was getting impatient, and spoke sternly. "Don't be so serious, Lucius." Seeing her beloved son being criticized, Lucius' wife Narcissa Malfoy immediately spoke up to defend him. This was a noble woman, tall and slender, with surprisingly white skin, and her beautiful face was full of arrogance. After defending her son, the lady looked at her husband and couldn't help but say, "Why do you care so much about such a person? He is just a child, and even though he has a noble surname, but, after all, he is a muggle born. Is it necessary to make such a fuss and rush to hold a party on the second day of the festival?" Faced with his wife's doubts, Lucius could only shake his head helplessly. He was a shrewd man in business. The same is true in the relationship between husband and wife. As a qualified husband, when your wife asks this question, no matter what you explain, it is wrong. The best way is to remain silent, then buy a gift of sufficient size, and apologize to the other party. But at this moment, Draco spoke. "Mother, Karl is not an ordinary child. He is a legend of Hogwarts. Do you know the magic cards of Hearthstone? That's what he invented, and the new flying broom, and the strange and wonderful ideas in his mind. And I can assure you 100% that he is definitely a noble. He should have been sorted into Slytherin and become good friends with me, instead of staying with those stupid Hufflepuffs every day." His son's explanation just helped Lucius out of the predicament. Lucius happily touched his son's hair and gave his approval. Feeling his father's approval, Draco straightened his back instantly, and his desire to become good friends with Karl became even more resolute. Narcissa didn't say anything else, and the family of 3 continued to stand at the door and wait for about 10 minutes as a ball of fire suddenly appeared. Cole landed on the ground and appeared in front of the 3 people. He was wearing a strange chef's uniform. There were traces of oil smoke on his body, making him look a little sloppy, and he was completely different from the aristocrat that Draco had mentioned before. But at this moment, Narcissa was no longer in the mood to pay attention to the young man in front of her. Her attention was all focused on the phoenix. It was not until the phoenix disappeared that she looked at Carol in surprise and asked quickly, "That's Fawkes, Headmaster Dumbledore's phoenix. How can you use it?" Chapter 100, Worldly Wise Karl and Gifts. Faced with Narcissa's question, Karl did not rush to answer, but took off his greasy chef's uniform, revealing the clean and tidy black suit underneath. He simply adjusted his bow tie and hair and used magic to remove the dirt on his face. A moment later, the young cook who had just got off work turned into a handsome blonde prince. What Karl did was not meaningless, although he did not like these pure-blood nobles, their arrogant airs and rules, but as a good young man who traveled through time under the education of Greater China in his previous life, he also understood the importance of giving face. Saying one thing to one person and another thing to another person, although it is hypocritical, it is indeed very practical. So, after Karl had finished his disguise, he slowly walked up to Narcissa, took the lady's right hand in a gentlemanly and elegant manner, and gave her a polite kiss. He immediately apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. Please excuse me, ma'am and sir. I just came out of the house because the grandfather who just adopted me is too useless and can't even take care of himself. I want to make sure he doesn't starve to death in the house, so before I left, I prepared 3 meals for him today. I'm a little late. I hope you can forgive me." This sincere expression of emotion, coupled with Karl's godly performance, immediately dispelled all the resentment in the hearts of the 3 people. Everyone expressed their understanding, even the dog system, which gave an objective and sincere evaluation. Speaking ill of the principal outside and damaging his reputation will result in an additional 100 points. How could that be? "Welcome to my roof, my distinguished guest." After Cole apologized, Lucius quickly backed down. He immediately welcomed her, pushing Draco forward, and said proudly, "The banquet doesn't start until noon, so we can discuss it before then, but I don't think there's any need to rush into business matters. Draco is your classmate. Let him accompany you to visit our manor so that you can improve your relationship." Draco, who was pushed to the front by his father, immediately perked up, pretended to be aristocratic, and bowed slightly to Karl. She said it in a voice that sounded as mature as possible. "Welcome, my dear classmate. Let me show you around my home and see the Malfoy family, its long history and glorious past." After saying that, the little master quickly turned sideways and stretched out a hand towards the door. It seemed that he cared very much about the job his father gave him. Karl did not spoil the other party's fun and followed Draco into the interior of the manor. As soon as the 2 walked in, they saw the luxurious reception room. The entire reception room was a traditional medieval aristocratic style reception room with extremely high ceilings. The reception room is decorated with gorgeous Baroque style decorations, with glittering gold paint and intricate carvings. It felt like the Palace of Fontainebleau in France, and Draco was very excited. He explained it to Cole with pride on his face. While introducing the manor and the long history of his family, he also revealed that his family had close ties with France across the ocean. In this way, Karl followed behind Draco, watching the other party proudly, but with some effort, introduced to him the origin and honor of each oil painting hanging in the living room. I have to say that Karl is a perfect listener, and he is well versed in the ways of the world. Know that when you ask someone to introduce their professional field to you, you should neither appear to be very knowledgeable nor appear to know nothing about it. Instead, you have to understand half of it. If you know everything, what else can others introduce? You know nothing, you don't respond to what others say, and the person introducing you will appear to have no interest. You only need to know what others want you to know and give them feedback in a timely manner when they mention it. At the same time, asking questions at just the right time to satisfy the other person's vanity is the perfect performance. Karl played the role perfectly, with his godlike performance and eloquent words. With just a few words, he easily controlled Draco. So much, so that Draco said happily after the introduction, "I was right about you, Mr. Hohenzollern. You are a true noble. You should not be sorted into Hufflepuff. You should transfer to Slytherin house. You will be respected and admired by everyone. I can assure you, if you have this idea, I can tell my father and he will definitely help you. He is the director of our school." Looking at Draco's excited look, Karl just smiled, but did not directly refuse him. After all, he still needs the other party to stay in Slytherin College and promote his products. This college is his big customer, so he pretended to be sorry and said, "I think this is unnecessary. Hufflepuff House also has its own advantages that you don't know about. I'm very happy there, so I won't bother your father." After saying that, he paused deliberately, pretending that he had just remembered something, and took out a beautifully packaged small box from his pocket and handed it over. "Oh, by the way, I forgot to give you this. I like the gold pocket watch you gave me very much, so this is your gift. I think you'll like it, too." Draco was a little disappointed when he first heard that Cole was unwilling to leave Hufflepuff, but now he saw the other party take out the gift for him. He instantly put his disappointment behind him, took the gift and opened it. When he saw what was inside, his eyes lit up instantly. It was a set of specially crafted Hearthstone cards, and there was nothing special about them. But Karl specially made a set of card backs for him, and the overall color of the card backs was the most luxurious and pretentious gold. However, the most important point is the exclusive pattern on the back of the card, which uses the Malfoy family crest. Karl, who knows that the two main driving forces of human beings are HS and pretense, this gift is just right. Draco took the proud little dragon in front of him, jumped up happily with the exclusive cards in his hand, and said ecstatically, "Thank you so much, Mr. Hohenzollern. This gift is so precious. I will definitely cherish it. You are my best friend." Hearing this, Karl just smiled, secretly signaled Draco not to be so excited, and kept winking at him. Draco really received the signal, took several deep breaths, suppressed his excitement, and looked towards the second floor with some fear. Sure enough, his father had just walked out of the study door. Lucius walked down the stairs slowly, and came in front of the two of them. He looked at Draco first and said, "It seems that you have taken good care of our guests. I'm very proud of you. Go and help your mother, the most distinguished guest. We have to provide the food ourselves." Hearing this, Draco happily bowed deeply to his father, and at the same time secretly gave Karl a look of thanks. He ran to the kitchen, and after his figure disappeared, Lucius looked at Karl and spoke in a very respectful tone, "Let's go, Mr. Hohenzollern. The guest you asked me to find has arrived." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.